Chapter 1655. What a powerful resentment! When Demon Emperor Shuexia turned into a demon, he killed most of the disciples of the Pure Land sect in this temple. I'm afraid these resentful spirits are the disciples of the Pure Land sect. Humph, these resentful spirits are nothing. Demon Emperor Shuexia's treasure, here I come. Whoosh! The shocking resentment could not stop these demons at all. Several figures suddenly rushed toward the gate of the Pure Land Buddhist temple. In the demon clan, strength was the most important. They could only achieve their current strength by stepping on the corpses of other demons. Although there were many dangers in the Pure Land Buddhist temple, no one flinched at the thought of the treasure left by Demon Emperor Shuexia. Several demons could not bear it and turned into a ray of light and rushed over. Demon Emperor Shuexia was the most dazzling demon emperor in the history of the demon clan. His status in the demon clan was almost second to the demon ancestor, the 10 sky demons. Even a random treasure left by Demon Emperor Shuexia would be a real step to the sky if someone got it. It was enough to surpass all the demons of the same realm and become an overlord. They would have a transcendent status in the demon clan. Because of this, even though everyone knew about the dangers of the Pure Land Buddhist temple, the devils who were present didn't hesitate at all after receiving the news. All of them dared to come. Humph! We can't let others get ahead of us. Let's go. Night Demon King, Blood Demon King, Void Demon King, these 3 demon kings also rushed over. These 3 demon kings were the top figures of the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. Although their bloodline was not as good as Demon Dragon, King Manticore, and other overlords, the 3 of them together burst out the power. Even King Manticore had to retreat from the 3 of them. They immediately rushed to the front. However, King Manticore was not willing to fall behind. There was also a tyrannical demon beside him. Apparently, it was the number 1 that he had roped in. He also rushed toward the Pure Land Buddhist temple. It was a race against time. Go! Chu Fengmian did not hesitate. His figure suddenly changed, and directly turned into a 1,000-feet-long demon dragon. The dragon power condensed and rushed toward the Pure Land Buddhist temple. Along the way, any demon who dared to block Chu Fengmian was blown away by Chu Fengmian. He was incomparably tyrannical. He displayed the tyranny of the dragon race to the fullest. Damn it, this demonic dragon! Several demons who were knocked back spat out a mouthful of blood. They glared at Chu Fengmian, who was dashing around violently, with anger on their faces. However, even more devils chose to avoid the battle. Not many devils were willing to engage in a pointless battle with Long Maluo. Inside the Pure Land Buddhist temple, one could tell at a glance that it was incomparably dangerous. No one was willing to get injured at this time. Chu Fengmian, who had transformed into a demonic dragon, quickly overtook many demons and rushed to the forefront. The King Manticore also noticed Chu Fengmian's arrival. Its eyes flickered, but it didn't stop him. Instead, Chu Fengmian chose to retreat. Chu Fengmian barged his way through. In front of him, only the Night Devil King and the other 2 were left. Get out of my way! Rumble! Chu Fengmian opened his mouth and let out a long roar. The roar of a dragon shook the surrounding demons. Chu Fengmian's dragon roar was much more terrifying than the dragon roar unleashed by the true dragon Mara. This was a great shock to many of the demon race. Almost all of the demons present were top powerhouses of the devil race. If it had been some weaker demons, they would have been shaken to death by this dragon roar. The Night Devil King and the other 2 swayed in the air. Apparently, they were also shaken by the dragon roar. The Blood Demon King turned around and scolded Chu Fengmian. Long Maluo, do you think you're invincible? How dare you fight against the 3 of us together? Get out of my way or die! Chu Fengmian snorted coldly. He didn't waste any more words and brazenly attacked. 2 dragon claws immediately bombarded the Blood Demon King. What he used was the purest martial technique of the dragon clan. He had to enter the Pure Land Buddhist temple alone to find the fragment of the Emperor jar. Now that the temple had opened and the young emperor hadn't arrived yet, Chu Fengmian had to take advantage of this time to obtain the fragment of the Emperor jar. Of course, he wouldn't let others enter before him. If the fragment fell into the hands of others, it would be troublesome. Damn it! Do you really think I'm afraid of you? The Blood Demon King was infuriated when he saw Chu Fengmian attack. He was also a demon king. When had he ever been looked down upon like this? He immediately struck out a ray of blood light. This ray of blood light directly bombarded Chu Fengmian. Murderous intent surged in Chu Fengmian's eyes. One of his dragon claws slammed down on the ray of blood light. In an instant, the two forces collided. Boom! Spiritual energy exploded. Chu Fengmian's dragon claws were invincible. The Blood Demon King's ray of blood light was crushed the moment it struck down. Puff! The Blood Demon King was hit by the backlash of the attack. He was forced to retreat and suffered some minor injuries. At the same time, Chu Fengmian's other dragon claw slammed down on the Blood Demon King. If he could kill the Blood Demon King now, Chu Fengmian wouldn't mind doing it now. Boom! Just as the dragon claw was about to land, another two forces bombarded the dragon claw and collided with the power of the claw. It was the Night Demon King and the Void Demon King. They had also made their move. They had formed an alliance with the Blood Demon King. Of course, they wouldn't let Chu Fengmian kill the Blood Demon King. However, when they saw Chu Fengmian defeat the Blood Demon King with a single move, they were both shocked. The two of them were incomparably shocked. How did Long Maluo's strength become so tyrannical? Could it be that he had encountered some great opportunity in the 9 domains? Long Maluo had always been the ruler of the 9 tribulations, Emperor Gu of the demon race. No one doubted his strength. However, the Blood Demon King wasn't a weakling either. At least, if the Blood Demon King and Long Maluo fought before, they would be on equal footing within 10 moves. Long Maluo would only gain the upper hand after 10 moves. Therefore, the Night Demon King and the Void Demon King didn't plan to attack when they saw the Blood Demon King make his move. They planned to let the Blood Demon King test Chu Fengmian's strength. However, they didn't expect the Blood Demon King to be so weak. He was defeated in one move and was even in danger of being killed. It was only then that the Night Demon King and the Void Demon King hurriedly made their move. Long Maluo stepped back. Let's mind our own business. Fighting here won't do anyone any good. The Night Demon King said coldly as he stared at Chu Fengmian. Scram if you don't want to die. Chu Fengmian's reply was as arrogant as ever. Even if the three of them joined forces, Chu Fengmian wasn't afraid at all. This Long Maluo wants to fight the three of them alone? When did his strength become so terrifying? Chapter 1656. It seems that this demonic dragon has found a great opportunity in the 9 regions. He's really lucky. Long Maluo does have some hope of stepping into the half-step celestial realm. It's not that easy to step into the half-step celestial realm. In the past 100 years, only the young emperor has stepped into the half-step celestial realm. Long Maluo is still far from it. The demon's eyes flickered as they discussed. None of them dared to step forward and get involved in the battle. To them, it was best for Long Maluo and the Night Demon King to fight until both sides were injured. With 2 less powerful enemies, they would have a chance to get more treasures. Long Maluo, you're too arrogant. The Night Demon King's expression changed when he heard Chu Fengmian's arrogant words. He wanted to give Chu Fengmian a way out so that both sides could avoid trouble. There would be a great battle in the Pure Land Buddhist temple, and he didn't want to get into a conflict with Chu Fengmian. But he didn't expect Chu Fengmian to not give him any face. He was the Night Demon King, a famous expert among the demons. How could he tolerate this? Long Maluo, since you're so arrogant, let's see if you have what it takes to be so arrogant. The Night Demon King looked at the Void Demon King and the Blood Demon King and roared. Attack! Boom! The Night Demon King, the Void Demon King, and the Blood Demon King attacked at the same time. The Night Demon King knew Long Maluo's strength. He had defeated the Blood Demon King with one move. If he were in Long Maluo's place, he would have ended up the same way. So once they attacked, they decided to shed all pretense of cordiality. The three of them attacked Chu Fengmian together. The spiritual power of the three combined condensed in the sky and turned into a giant demonic hand that grabbed at Chu Fengmian. The surrounding mountains shook when the move was made. The three demon kings were the pinnacle of the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. Although their combined power couldn't reach the half-step celestial realm, no one among the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu could rival them. The giant hand of demonic will covered the sky and the earth as it enveloped the demonic dragon's body. It was about to grab the demonic dragon. A bunch of ants. Even if you join hands, you're still trash. Break for me. Chu Fengmian snorted coldly. The demonic dragon's body suddenly soared into the sky. It spun and danced, and a rolling dragon's might descended. The moment the demonic hand approached Chu Fengmian's body, it was mercilessly crushed by the dragon's might. Battle dragon dances in the heavens. Rumble. In the next moment, the surging dragon might condensed into the appearance of an ancient war dragon and roared at the Night Demon King and the other two. What? How is this possible? The Night Demon Emperor and his crew were astounded. They panicked at the sight before them. They quickly gathered their spiritual energy and formed a barrier to defend themselves against the attack of the primordial battle dragon. Crack! The primordial war dragon charged forward. The barrier shattered one after another, and the Night Demon King and the other two were forced back, spitting out large mouthfuls of essence blood. Chu Fengmian did not intend to let the three of them go. After repelling the three of them, the demonic dragon's body chased after them. 2 dragon checks mercilessly fell. Let's go. The Blood Demon King saw Chu Fengmian coming over. His body flickered and turned into a blood-red light. He grabbed the Night Demon King and the Void Demon King, turned into a blood-red light, and fled 10 miles away. Chu Fengmian's 2 dragon claws also hit empty air. Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered as he watched the three of them flee. He thought for a moment and did not pursue them. Instead, he flew directly in the direction of the Pure Land Buddhist Temple. He was the first to rush into the Pure Land Buddhist Temple. How did Long Maluo's strength become so terrifying? It was only when they saw the demonic dragon enter the Pure Land Buddhist Temple that many of the Demon Clan experts recovered from their shock and said in disbelief. As an expert of the demonic dragon clan, Long Maluo's strength was naturally known by everyone. Many of the people present had fought with Long Maluo before. However, although Long Maluo was strong, he was only a head stronger than the Chimera King and the others. Fighting against the Blood Demon King and the others, 1 against 2 should be his limit. In the past, it would have been impossible for him to fight 1 against 3. But today, he defeated the Blood Demon King, the Night Demon King, and the others with a single move. Long Maluo is not to be trifled with. Many experts of the devil race understood this point, but they didn't stop. Instead, their figures flickered again and again. Many of them also activated the escape light and entered the Buddhist temple of the Pure Land. Chu Fengmian's battle with the Night Demon King and the others was just a small interlude. Their goal was still the Pure Land Buddhist temple and the treasures of the Demon Emperor Evil Blood. As for the battle just now, it was just a reminder to them not to provoke Chu Fengmian. I didn't expect Long Maluo's strength to be so terrifying. If he had attacked in the Pure Land Buddhist temple, I'm afraid we wouldn't have been able to escape unscathed. On the other side, the Blood Demon King and the others had recovered from their injuries. Among them, the Night Demon King looked in the direction Chu Fengmian had left and couldn't help but frown. Chu Fengmian's strength just now was beyond their expectations. Even if the three of them joined forces, it was almost impossible to kill Chu Fengmian. Long Maluo's strength has increased so quickly. I'm afraid he has encountered some amazing fortuitous encounter. If we can kill him, we will get more benefit. The Blood Demon King licked the corner of his mouth and said greedily. Although he had suffered a loss just now, not only did it not dispel the idea in his heart, but it also made him more excited. His strength increased by devouring the essence blood of expert. The stronger the essence blood he devoured, the greater his strength would increase. There will be many dangers in this temple. Long Maluo is moving alone anyway. We can always seize the opportunity to kill him when he is unprepared. The Void Demon King's eyes flickered, and his voice was filled with killing intent. The three figures conversed for a while, then turned into a ray of escape light and flew toward the Pure Land Buddhist Temple. The Pure Land Buddhist Temple. Chu Fengmian was the first to rush into the Pure Land Buddhist Temple. The moment he entered the temple, Chu Fengmian transformed back into his human form. He had just displayed the demonic dragon's body because he was afraid of exposing his identity when facing the enemy. Among the Demon Clan experts, there were not many who knew about the Dragon Clan. Therefore, displaying the power of the demonic dragon's body was enough to fool them. Kill, kill, kill. All of you must die. All of you must be buried with us. Boom! Just as Chu Fengmian stepped into the Pure Land Buddhist Temple, before he had time to observe his surroundings, more than a dozen resentful spirits emerged from the surroundings and suddenly attacked Chu Fengmian. Chapter 1657. These resentful spirits were almost as strong as Emperor Gu. They were full of resentment. These resentful spirits wanted to kill everyone who entered the temple to accompany them. More than a dozen resentful spirits attacked Chu Fengmian at the same time. The martial skills they used were basically Buddhist martial skills. It seemed that what Chu Fengmian heard outside was the same. The resentful spirits inside should be the former disciples of the Pure Land sect. The decline of the Pure Land sect had a lot to do with the Pure Land Buddha turning into Demon Emperor Shuexia. Later, when Demon Emperor Shuexia returned to the Pure Land sect, he killed almost half of the disciples in the Pure Land Buddhist temple and turned into so many resentful spirits. This was also the reason for the decline of the Pure Land sect and its eventual demise. Ancestors' first move. Facing the resentful spirits coming from all directions, Chu Fengmian sneered and condensed them in his palm. With a wave of his hand, it turned into a dragon claw and swept across. Boom! Boom! All the resentful spirits near Chu Fengmian were killed. This time, he came to the Pure Land Buddhist temple to find the fragment of the Emperor Jar. He was too lazy to be entangled with these resentful spirits. After exterminating all the surrounding vengeful spirits with a single move, Chu Fengmian suddenly shut his eyes tightly. Within a breath's time, he opened them once again and looked towards a path within the Buddhist temple. His figure flashed as he charged in. After entering the Pure Land Buddhist temple, Chu Fengmian could clearly feel the location of the fragment of the Emperor Jar. Following the direction of the Emperor Jar, he rushed into the depths of the Pure Land Buddhist temple. At the same time, Chu Fengmian also felt that countless Demon Clan experts had rushed into the Pure Land Buddhist temple behind him. These Demon Clan experts rushed in and continued to rush towards the depths of the Buddhist temple. However, within the Pure Land Buddhist temple, there were more than 1,000 passageways. Almost every passageway was different. Chu Fengmian felt that the fragment of the Emperor Jar was now at the end of the passage. The Pure Land Buddhist temple was not like the mausoleum of the Golden Buddha, where there were Buddhist restrictions everywhere. It seemed that the restrictions were destroyed by Demon Emperor Shuexia himself. There were traces of demonic will in many places. Demonic will and resentful spirits could not see that Chu Fengmian was now in a Buddhist temple. Rather than a Buddhist temple, it was more like the burial place of a large number of Pure Land sect disciples. Without the threat of the Buddhist restrictions, Chu Fengmian was much more relaxed. He encountered all the resentful spirits along the way. I don't know what the sword Qi Meng Yanluo is? As Chu Fengmian was moving forward, Chu Fengmian thought. Yanluo mentioned before was the danger in the Pure Land Buddhist temple. Spirit Qi of the Demon Clan experts of Demon Clan experts of the Demon Clan of the Demon Clan experts were demon experts of the martial demon. The strength of these resentful spirits was far inferior to that of the demon race's cultivators. Although they were strong when they were alive, their strength after death was less than 10%. Level's spirit martial was of them. Qi Yanlong of God of the powerful of God of the of. Of course it. However, Chu Fengmian had yet to detect the existence of sword Qi in the Pure Land Buddhist temple. Just as Chu Fengmian was pondering, a shadow suddenly rushed towards him. Another resentful spirit? Chu Fengmian thought it was a resentful spirit. He gathered his spiritual power and looked forward. Just as he was about to gather his spiritual power and attack, he suddenly realized that it was a sword Qi the size of a human figure. The sword Qi contained an extremely overbearing power. It seemed to have sensed Chu Fengmian's presence and slashed towards him. Is this the sword Qi Meng Yanluo mentioned? Chu Fengmian was still thinking about the sword Qi. He didn't expect to encounter it so soon. The sword Qi slashed towards Chu Fengmian mercilessly. The moment the sword Qi locked onto him, Chu Fengmian felt a chill run down his spine. It was as if he had sensed great danger. Sword out. The ancestral Dragon Supreme sword came out from the World's Edge sword case on Chu Fengmian's back. Chu Fengmian held the sword in his hand and slashed towards the sword Qi. Chu Fengmian had experienced countless battles of life and death. He had a certain premonition of danger. The sword Qi was obviously a great threat to Chu Fengmian. That was why Chu Fengmian felt so threatened. Therefore, Chu Fengmian didn't dare to underestimate it. He channeled all his spiritual power into the sword edge. The sword soared into the sky and slashed towards the sword Qi. Bang! When the sword Qi collided, Chu Fengmian actually felt a sharp and tyrannical power that wanted to tear his body apart. The 129,600 fleshly crystals in Chu Fengmian's body condensed into a perfect body to withstand the sharpness of the sword Qi. What is this? How can a sword Qi have such terrifying power? Chu Fengmian was shocked. He had activated more than half of his power just now. Even if 4 or 5 Emperor Gu of the 9 tribulations attacked together, Chu Fengmian's sword light would be enough to dissolve their bombardment. However, when the sword Qi collided with Chu Fengmian's sword light, Chu Fengmian suffered such great pressure that his sword light was mercilessly crushed. If Chu Fengmian's body hadn't reached the half-step immortal real body, the sword Qi would have been destroyed. The remaining power of the sword Qi just now was enough to completely blow up Chu Fengmian's body and destroy it. A single streak of sword Qi actually contained such terrifying power. While Chu Fengmian was still in shock, the sword Qi didn't seem to want to let Chu Fengmian go. It slashed towards Chu Fengmian again. In an instant, the sword Qi split into thousands and slashed towards Chu Fengmian from all directions. A sword Qi knows swordsmanship? Chu Fengmian was shocked when he saw the sword Qi slashing towards him from all directions. Sword Qi was an inanimate object. Pure sword principle could condense spiritual power into sword Qi. Chu Fengmian could easily release thousands of sword Qi. However, the sword Qi in front of him was like a living thing. It knew swordsmanship. The moment it touched Chu Fengmian, it performed swordsmanship and slashed towards him. When it performed swordsmanship, the power of the sword Qi was several times more terrifying. The overwhelming sword Qi was obviously trying to kill Chu Fengmian in one fell swoop. This sword Qi, is it the supreme sword Qi? It knows swordsmanship. No matter what, this is definitely a good treasure. It will be of great use to me. Let me subdue this sword Qi first. Chapter 1658. This time, Chu Fengmian was already prepared to face the overwhelming sword Qi. After knowing the horror of this sword Qi, Chu Fengmian had already activated all his strength. The Sword God Realm sword essence suddenly flew out from Chu Fengmian's back and fell on the blade of Chu Fengmian's sword. A sword breaks the firmament. Boom! With one stroke, the sword chi of tens of thousands of sword chi blasted out and swept everything away. The overwhelming sword chi was completely broken by Chu Fengmian's stroke. Although this sword chi was powerful, it was a dead object after all. Under Chu Fengmian's full strength, even Long Maluo could kill it, let alone this sword chi. Moreover, compared to the mystery of swordsmanship, Chu Fengmian's swordsmanship was even more mysterious than the sword chi. Boom! The sword chi that filled the sky was broken, and the sword chi was also beaten back, with cracks appearing on its surface. Suppress! Chu Fengmian shouted coldly. Spiritual power condensed in the palm of his hand, and he immediately suppressed the sword chi. Dragon might emerged from Chu Fengmian's back and suppressed it. This sword chi was mercilessly suppressed under Chu Fengmian's feet. Even so, this sword chi was still resisting. It struck out countless sword lights in an attempt to break free from Chu Fengmian's hand. Still want to escape? Divine Nine Dragons Cauldron. Suppress it. Chu Fengmian's mind moved. With a wave of his hand, the Divine Nine Dragons Cauldron with 9 dragon heads flew out and suppressed the sword chi. The Heavenly Nine Dragons Cauldron firmly suppressed the body of the sword chi. The resistance of the sword chi was completely suppressed. At the same time, Chu Fengmian's dragon might fell and shrouded the sword chi, obliterating the hostility of this sword chi. Chu Fengmian's strength now stood at the peak of the 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu. Chu Fengmian could kill the 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu with a strong bloodline like Long Maluo. No one could escape from Chu Fengmian's hands unless they were in the half-step celestial realm. Moreover, Chu Fengmian used the Divine Nine Dragons Cauldron this time. Suppressing the sword chi, it was enough to make it impossible for the sword chi to escape. This sword chi's power was gradually obliterated by the Divine Nine Dragons Cauldron and Chu Fengmian's dragon might. Its sharpness also dissipated a lot. After all, this sword chi was an inanimate object. Every bit of energy he lost was a little bit less. Chu Fengmian, on the other hand, had the support of the Divine Vein, which allowed him to recover his spiritual energy at any given moment. In just a few minutes, the power of the sword chi had been reduced by 50%. Take it. Seeing that the sword chi was almost worn out, Chu Fengmian suddenly waved his hand and the Divine Nine Dragon Cauldron disappeared. At the same time, a huge palm caught the sword chi. The sword chi was caught in the palm of the hand. Under the dragon might, this sword chi no longer attacked Chu Fengmian. The power of this sword chi is truly tyrannical. Just its offensive power alone is likely much more frightening than the dragon Mara. It's a pity that it's an inanimate object. Every bit of its power dissipates. It's not as difficult to deal with as a cultivator. Chu Fengmian looked at the sword chi in the palm of his hand and thought to himself. However, in terms of danger, this sword chi was much more dangerous than many of the 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu. The sword skill displayed by the sword chi was probably at the pinnacle of a 9 Calamity Ancient Emperor, an expert at the level of young Master Huang. The slightest carelessness and being attacked by the sword chi could result in death. What surprised Chu Fengmian even more was that this sword chi actually knew swordsmanship. Moreover, this sword chi was not supreme sword chi. Chu Fengmian only knew about supreme sword chi that knew swordsmanship and had its own consciousness. However, the sword chi in Chu Fengmian's palm was not supreme sword chi. The power contained in it was completely different from supreme sword chi. Chu Fengmian had obtained 1,800 supreme sword chi. Others might not be very familiar with supreme sword chi, but Chu Fengmian was very familiar with the aura of supreme sword chi. Although this sword chi was powerful, it was not a supreme sword chi. Instead, it was something else. However, in terms of power, this sword chi was much more powerful than many supreme sword chis. Of course, the true power of supreme sword qi could only be unleashed when 3,000 of them were gathered together. Even 2,999 supreme sword qi could not be considered the true power of supreme sword qi. Only when 3,000 of them were complete could the true power of supreme sword qi be unleashed. After confirming that this sword qi was not supreme sword qi, Chu Fengmian's eyes showed some disappointment. Every time he obtained a supreme sword qi, his power would increase by a lot. Chu Fengmian originally thought that this sword qi was supreme sword qi, but it turned out that it was not. Moreover, this sword qi was in Chu Fengmian's palm. Chu Fengmian observed it for a long time, but he still could not see through its mystery. Even with Chu Fengmian's understanding of swordsmanship, he could not see through the mystery of this sword qi. The owner of this sword qi had a much more terrifying understanding of swordsmanship than Chu Fengmian. Such a terrifying sword qi actually existed in this Buddhist temple. Just what kind of person had barged into this Buddhist temple and left behind such a terrifying sword qi? Chu Fengmian's eyes were cold. He knew that this sword qi was definitely not left behind by Demon Emperor Shuexie. Although Demon Emperor Shuexie's strength was terrifying, his dual cultivation of Buddhism and demon was already extremely terrifying. Even if he was a genius, he did not have the time to be distracted and comprehend swordsmanship. This sword qi was not only powerful, but the swordsmanship contained in it was also extremely profound. It was definitely not left behind by Demon Emperor Shuexie. Someone must have barged into the Buddhist temple and left the sword qi behind. Chu Fengmian looked at the sword qi in his palm and carefully observed it. Chu Fengmian actually felt an unusual sense of familiarity from this sword qi. But where did this sense of familiarity come from? Chu Fengmian was still thinking about it. Boom! At this moment, an incomparably huge demonic palm suddenly fell from the sky and blasted towards Chu Fengmian. The appearance of this demonic palm was silent, as if it had caught Chu Fengmian's contemplation and suddenly launched a sneak attack. Long Maluo, your time of death has come. The moment the demonic palm descended, 3 figures also flew out from within. Chapter 1659. These 3 figures were none other than the Blood Demon King, the Night Demon King, and the Void Demon King, who had fought Chu Fengmian outside. The 3 of them followed closely behind Chu Fengmian and entered the Buddhist temple in pursuit of Chu Fengmian. Now that they had hurried over, they saw Chu Fengmian deep in thought and attack. Chu Fengmian's consciousness was at its weakest when he was deep in thought. A sneak attack at this time was the best opportunity for the 3 of them. The 3 of them gathered their spiritual energy and formed a gigantic demonic palm that blasted toward Chu Fengmian. Demonic palm of annihilation. The moment the 3 of them appeared, the palm fell from the sky and bombarded Chu Fengmian's body. They watched as Chu Fengmian's body was surrounded by billowing demonic will. All 3 of them had cold smiles on their faces. However, before they could maintain their smiles, their expressions froze. A beam of sword aura suddenly shot out from the demonic will, and the demonic palm of annihilation that enveloped Chu Fengmian was torn apart by the beam of sword aura. The demonic will was cut into pieces by the beam of sword aura. Sword aura! Sword technique? How is this possible? You're not Long Maluo? Who are you? The Night Demon King and the others shouted angrily when they saw the sword aura shot out from the demonic will. The demon race experts all knew each other well, but they had never heard of Long Maluo knowing sword technique, let alone such a mysterious one. Suddenly, the Night Demon King understood everything. Why had Long Maluo's strength increased so quickly? It wasn't because Long Maluo's strength had increased so quickly, but because the person they had just fought wasn't Long Maluo. You're not Long Maluo. You sneaked into the temple and tried to steal the treasures inside? Damn it. Spread the news and inform the young emperor. An enemy has entered the temple. The Night Demon King roared frantically. The Blood Demon King and the Void Demon King were experts who had experienced countless battles. When they heard the Night Demon King's words, they reacted instantly. 2 beams of light, one red and one gray, flew toward the entrance of the temple. Now you know? Unfortunately, it's too late. None of you 3 can leave here alive today. Supreme Sword Formation. Whoosh! All of a sudden, numerous beams of sword light flew out from the end of the tunnel, each of which was a beam of sword energy. In total, there were 1,800 beams of sword energy flying out and converging together. Immediately, it turned into a supreme sword array in the tunnel. The escape light of the Blood Demon King and the Void Demon King was blocked by the supreme sword array. At the same time, killing intent surged in Chu Fengmian's eyes. This time, Chu Fengmian didn't plan to let the 3 of them go back alive. Therefore, he directly used the sword light and no longer hid his identity, reverting to his original appearance. That was because all 3 of them were going to die under Chu Fengmian's sword today. None of them were going to leave this place alive. Die, all of you! Boom! The sword in Chu Fengmian's hand flashed repeatedly. Whoosh! A beam of sword light suddenly slashed out. The power of the stars condensed on the blade, turning into a river of stars formed by sword energy, slashing toward the Night Demon King. There were many demon experts in the temple, so Chu Fengmian didn't want to waste any time. With one move, he used one of his most powerful sword techniques, the 9 Profound Sword Art. Tanlang, Jusong, Lutsuan, Tianji. The first 4 moves of the 9 Profound Sword Art burst out at the same time. The power of the stars in the sky turned into a river of stars. In an instant, the Night Demon King fell into the river of stars. The supreme sword energy in the river of stars bombarded his body. What kind of sword technique is this? How can it be so mysterious and terrifying? Are you Chu Fengmian? You are the young emperor's great enemy. The Night Demon King was shocked when he saw that he was instantly enveloped by the river of stars. The strength of this sword technique was beyond his imagination. The Night Demon King fell into the river of stars. The sword energy in the river of stars bombarded the Night Demon King's body almost all the time. The power of each of these sword energy was comparable to the full blow of the 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu at his peak. Even the Night Demon King found it difficult to deal with it. He could only condense his demonic will to form an armor of demonic will on his body to resist the bombardment of the sword energy. At the same time, the Night Demon King suddenly guessed Chu Fengmian's identity. Among the younger generation of warriors, only Chu Fengmian could use such a sword technique. I didn't expect you to guess my identity so quickly. Hearing the Night Demon King reveal Chu Fengmian's identity, Chu Fengmian understood that his recent actions were too dazzling. The Night Demon King guessed Chu Fengmian's identity the moment he saw the sword technique Chu Fengmian used. It seemed that to hide his identity, he couldn't use this sword technique easily. But this time, the Night Demon King and the other 2 were already dead in Chu Fengmian's eyes. Letting the Night Demon King guess his identity was just to let him know when he died. Die! Chu Fengmian held the spiritual sword in his hand and stepped forward into the river of stars. The dazzling sword light slashed toward the Night Demon King. The sword will of the divine sword realm erupted at this moment and shrouded Chu Fengmian's sword. The sharpness of this sword seemed to be unstoppable in the world. It was an extremely tyrannical sword. The surrounding space was constantly trembling. Chu Fengmian was about to kill the Night Demon King with this tyrannical sword. Oh no, hurry up and save the Night Demon King. The Blood Demon King and the Void Demon King were blocked by the Supreme Sword Formation and couldn't rush out to send a message. Now that they saw the Night Demon King in an extremely dangerous situation, the 2 of them immediately took action. They turned into a giant demonic hand and grabbed toward the river of stars. They also saw Chu Fengmian's strength. It was much more terrifying than the real Long Maluo. Only the 3 of them together could they contend with Chu Fengmian. Therefore, they couldn't let the Night Demon King die in the River of Stars. The giant demonic hand passed through layers of space and went deep into the River of Stars to grab the Night Demon King. It wanted to save the Night Demon King from the Sword Chi Galaxy. Humph! Chu Fengmian only snorted when he saw the Blood Demon King and the Void Demon King trying to save the Night Demon King. The World's Edge sword case appeared behind his back and opened abruptly. Dozens of sword chi flew out from it and slashed at the giant demonic hand. Boom! 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 The sword chi slashed the giant demonic hand. The giant demonic hand didn't even have time to grab the Night Demon King before it was smashed into pieces. Chapter 1660. At the same time, the sword chi slashed towards the Blood Demon King and the Void Demon King after destroying the demonic will hand. This time, Chu Fengmian did not only want to kill the Night Demon King, but also the Void Demon King and the Blood Demon King. Retreat! The Void Demon King and the Blood Demon King's faces changed as they retreated. They could feel the terrifying power contained in the sword chi. After all, the World's Edge sword case was the most precious spiritual treasure of the World's Edge sword immortal. As Chu Fengmian's strength increased, the sword chi of the Horizon sword chi became extremely terrifying. Chu Fengmian did not care about the Void Demon King and the Blood Demon King. Instead, the sword in his hand flickered as he pointed it at the Night Demon King. The Night Demon King was the core of the three of them. If he killed the Night Demon King, the other two would be easier to deal with. The Way of the Dark Night. Eternal darkness. The Night Demon King let out a long roar. Suddenly, darkness condensed beside him. The light of the world was devoured by the darkness, falling into eternal darkness. This Night Devil King was also a famous powerhouse among the devil race. He had countless trump cards, and it was unknown how many dangers he had experienced. Even if he fell into such a dangerous situation, he could easily escape. The Night Demon King's body merged with the darkness. It was difficult to detect his whereabouts in the darkness. At the same time, the Night Demon King's power was still accumulating in the darkness, preparing to launch a counterattack. Rumble! The demonic will from all directions shrouded the darkness. Pure demonic will was everywhere in the Pure Land Buddhist temple. The demonic will seemed to have turned into the Night Demon King's power, condensing in the darkness. In an instant, the condensed demonic will turned into an incomparably deep darkness, sweeping towards Chu Fengmian like a wave. In the darkness there was a dangerous aura everywhere. Once one was sucked into it, one would be doomed eternally. Chu Fengmian did not expect the Night Demon King's strength to have reached such a level. This kind of strength was not weaker than Long Maluo. It seemed that the Night Demon King had been hiding his strength all this time. Today, at the critical moment, he could not care less about hiding his strength. He suddenly burst out with all his strength and launched a counterattack against Chu Fengmian. The night waves swept everything. Even Chu Fengmian's sword did not have any light when it hit it. It was as if it was sucked into the depths of the night waves and was devoured. Chu Fengmian, Xiao Di has been wanting your head for a long time. Since you've delivered yourself to his doorstep, I'll take your head and present it to Xiao Di. The Night Demon King's excited voice was Chu Fengmian. The young emperor had tried to kill Chu Fengmian time and time again. Anyone who could kill Chu Fengmian and present his head to the young emperor would be rewarded with endless benefits. This opportunity was King. The Night Demon Kings. Kings. At the same time, the Blood Demon King and the Void Demon King also unleashed their full strength at this moment, shattering all of the sword auras from the World's Edge sword case. At this moment, he also launched an attack on Chu Fengmian. The Blood Demon King waved his hand, and a rain of blood fell from the sky. However, every drop of the blood rain contained an evil and destructive power. As soon as it landed on Chu Fengmian's body, it corroded his spiritual power. The Void Demon King condensed his spiritual energy into a long spear and stabbed at Chu Fengmian. The tables were turned. At this moment, the three demon kings unleashed their tyrannical strength. They actually wanted to turn the situation around and counterattack Chu Fengmian. They wanted to kill Chu Fengmian instead. Chu Fengmian, you've been scheming for a long time. You didn't expect us to be as weak as you thought. Do you think you can defeat the three of us just because you killed Long Maluo? Holy dragon sex, once in 1,000 years genius. Today, I will devour your essence and blood. Let's see how much power your genius blood can give me. Blood Demon King looked greedily at Chu Fengmian. He could feel the powerful bloodline power in Chu Fengmian's body. Hiding your strength? Do you think you're the only ones who can hide your strength? Chu Fengmian's expression didn't change in the slightest when he saw the endless power coming at him. His lips moved slightly, revealing a sarcastic smile. Destroy them all. Rumble. A colorless flame ignited in Chu Fengmian's palm and immediately enveloped the entire spiritual sword. At this moment, all of the spiritual energy in Chu Fengmian's body was injected into the tip of the sword. Tri-Sun Blazing Sword. The sword's radiance was even more dazzling than the 9 profound sword technique. Why did the sword's power suddenly increase? In an instant, Chu Fengmian sensed that the might of the Tri-Sun Raging Flames sword in his hand had suddenly increased. It was as if there was some kind of force in the temple, which increased the power of the slash by 50%. Chu Fengmian was shocked. He didn't hesitate and slashed down with the spiritual sword in his hand. The stronger the Tri-Sun Blazing Sword was, the better. Chu Fengmian didn't care too much about it. Rumble. The moment Chu Fengmian struck with the sword, the scorching flame swept everything around him. The sword's radiance formed by the pure yang heavenly fire swept toward Chu Fengmian's surroundings. The drops of blood in the air evaporated completely before they fell. The evil demonic intent contained in them was burned out by the flame. The long spear condensed by the Void Demon King and the dark sea waves were all destroyed by the sword's radiance. Chu Fengmian's strength was invincible among the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. Moreover, the Tri-Sun Blazing Sword this time was 50% more powerful than before. The sword's radiance was earth-shattering. All the demonic intent and any resistance were meaningless in front of Chu Fengmian's sword. Ah! What kind of sword technique is this? It's an immortal technique. An immortal technique! The Night Demon King roared in horror. Immortal techniques could only be mastered by experts of the celestial realm. Even experts of the half-step celestial realm could not touch them. Only martial arts geniuses like the 9 profound celestial venerables could master immortal techniques before reaching the celestial realm. Until his death, the Night Demon King couldn't imagine that Chu Fengmian could master immortal technique. The cries of agony stopped abruptly. The next moment, the Night Demon King's body fell into the sea of fire and exploded. Chapter 1661. Ah! On the other side, the Blood Demon King and the Void Demon King were in the same situation as the Night Demon King. The sword edge formed by the pure yang heavenly fire was constantly being burned by the burning flames. Especially the Blood Demon King, who was born from the blood of an evil demon between heaven and earth. The pure yang skyfire could restrain evil. The Blood Demon King's body was getting weaker and weaker under the burning of the pure yang skyfire. Die! Chu Fengmian struck out with his palm. A wave of spiritual power surged out, and the Blood Demon King's body exploded immediately. The Blood Demon King's essence and blood were all condensed into Chu Fengmian's body. After being refined by the sky-devouring secret technique, they were turned into Chu Fengmian's power. The only one left was the Void Demon King. The Void Demon clan was unique because they did not have a physical body. As long as they had demonic will, they could be reborn again and again, no matter how many attacks they suffered. The Void Demon clan was not the most powerful among the Demon clan, but they were definitely the most difficult to deal with. Under the burning of the pure yang skyfire, The Void Demon King was reborn again and again, and his aura did not weaken at all. There was pure demonic will everywhere in this Buddhist temple. The Void Demon King relied on this demonic will to be burned to death by Chu Fengmian's pure yang skyfire and reborn again and again. Chu Fengmian, you can't kill me. The young emperor is about to arrive, and it will be your time of death. The Void Demon King's body was trapped in the pure yang skyfire and could not escape, but he was able to reconstruct his body again and again. He looked at Chu Fengmian and said provocatively, "Are you still waiting for the young emperor to save you? What a joke, can't kill you. You're just a puny void demon. Come out, Heart Demon King." Chu Fengmian laughed coldly and called out. Behind him, the king of the inner demons appeared. Looking at the Void Demon King in front of him, the Heart Demon King showed a look of desire. The Heart Demon King relied on devouring other demons to grow. Once devoured by the Heart Demon King, it would bring great benefits to the Heart Demon King. Heart Demon. This is the Heart Demon King. How is it possible? How could you possibly tame such a monster? The Void Demon King shouted in disbelief when he saw the Heart Demon King appear behind Chu Fengmian. The Mental Demon Clan was an extremely unique clan among the Devil Clan. They were vaguely detached from the Devil Clan. Even many powerful Devil Clans were extremely wary of the Mental Demon Clan. Everything in the world had inner demons. Even the strongest experts could only subdue the inner demons in their hearts, but they could not eliminate them. Compared to the Void Demon, the Heart Demon was more like an illusory existence that could never be destroyed. It wasn't easy for ordinary people to suppress their own inner demons. Subduing an inner demon was easier said than done. Unless one had an invincible Tao heart, doing such a thing was akin to courting death. Too much nonsense. King of the inner demons, devour! Chu Fengmian couldn't be bothered to waste his breath on the Hollow Demon King. Under his command, the King of the inner demons pounced and opened its mouth to devour the Hollow Demon King. Chu Fengmian remained motionless as he watched the King of the inner demons devour the Hollow Demon King in front of him. However, Chu Fengmian was constantly circulating his power to suppress the Hollow Demon King. The Hollow Demon King was unable to resist the devouring of the King of the inner demons and was devoured bit by bit. Ah! The sound of the Hollow Demon King's struggling became softer and softer, and finally disappeared completely. The Hollow Demon King had been mercilessly devoured by the King of the inner demons and became a part of it. After devouring the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu, the King of the inner demons' strength increased a lot. It was only a little bit away from reaching the peak level of the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. The improvement of the King of the inner demons' strength was also a great help to Chu Fengmian. After eliminating the 3 Hollow Demon Kings, Chu Fengmian activated the power of the Emperor Jar. Chu Fengmian had already sensed it. The fragment of the Emperor Jar was not far from here. It was just ahead. The end of the passage was where the fragment of the Emperor Jar was located. Boom! Right at this moment, all of a sudden, the entire Buddhist temple began to tremble. A massive force had suddenly descended upon the temple. The arrival of this force shrouded the entire Buddhist temple. Everything in the temple seemed to be subdued by this force. Countless demons were trembling in fear. Chu Fengmian's expression changed drastically in an instant. This force was definitely the power of a half-step celestial being. It was enough to affect the entire Buddhist temple. The strength of this person was unfathomable. In Chu Fengmian's mind, he immediately knew who this person was. The young emperor. Only the young emperor of the demon race had such terrifying strength. Chu Fengmian originally wanted to get the fragment of the Emperor Jar before the young emperor arrived. He did not expect the young emperor to suddenly arrive and enter the Buddhist temple. At the entrance of the Buddhist temple, a young man with an incomparably noble temperament, like an emperor, stepped into the temple. Sword will fluctuation? The moment the young emperor arrived in the Buddhist temple, he suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes revealed a strange and profound light. Under this pair of eyes, nothing could hide from them. In the depths of the Buddhist temple, Chu Fengmian suddenly felt as if a pair of eyes were watching him. His every move, his every disguise. Under the gaze of this pair of eyes, nothing could hide. "I've been discovered." Chu Fengmian suddenly rushed into the depths of the Buddhist temple, no longer hiding himself. Chu Fengmian's disguise was enough to fool King Manticore and the others, but it could not fool the young emperor. The young emperor's strength was boundless. His eyes could see through all disguises. Under the gaze of that gaze, Chu Fengmian understood that the young emperor had seen through all of his disguises. There was no point in pretending now. He activated his bloodline power to the extreme and turned into a ray of light, flying into the depths of the Buddhist temple. As long as he got the fragment of the emperor jar, he could leave immediately. The young emperor had come to the demon emperor's cave residence for the demon emperor's inheritance. As long as Chu Fengmian escaped from the Buddhist temple, the young emperor would not continue to pursue him. If he got the fragment of the emperor jar, Chu Fengmian would have 7 fragments of the emperor jar in his possession. Then, Chu Fengmian would break through again and step into the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. With the help of the emperor jar, Chu Fengmian would have the ability to contend with the young emperor. Chapter 1662. It was none other than Xiao Di. Xiao Di sensed Chu Fengmian's presence as soon as he arrived at the Pure Land Buddhist temple. Ignoring the treasures in the Pure Land Buddhist temple, he chased after Chu Fengmian. Such determination almost represented Xiao Di's murderous intent towards Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian had snatched the bronze heavenly demon skeleton from Xiao Di, which almost cost him his best chance to enter the celestial realm. Moreover, Chu Fengmian had the Emperor Jar, a broken immortal weapon. Regardless of which reason it was, Xiao Di was determined to kill Chu Fengmian. Both gave Xiao Di a reason to kill Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian sensed that Xiao Di's aura was much stronger than before. Given Xiao Di's strength, he must have obtained a lot of treasures in the Hidden Land. These treasures had all become the young emperor's strength, making him even more terrifying. In the span of a few breaths, the young emperor's figure had caught up to Chu Fengmian. Suddenly, he attacked Chu Fengmian with his fist. "Damn it! Both swords!" Chu Fengmian's expression changed again and again. His figure flickered and 2 spiritual swords appeared in his hands, slashing towards Xiao Di. The power of the 2 swords collided with Xiao Di's palm. Chu Fengmian's 2 swords were mercilessly destroyed, but this time, the power of Xiao Di's palm was reduced by 70 to 80%. Chu Fengmian's body began to tremble violently the moment the attack hit him. But this time, Chu Fengmian didn't feel the intense danger he felt when he fought Xiao Di last time. All of this was due to the increase in Chu Fengmian's strength. After entering the Tibetan land, Chu Fengmian's strength had increased by 3 times. Although he was still far from being able to fight Xiao Di head-on, he might be able to withstand a few of Xiao Di's moves. Chu Fengmian's escape light didn't slow down at all after withstanding Xiao Di's palm. He flew deeper into the Pure Land Buddhist temple. Xiao Di was watching all of this with a look of surprise in his eyes. He didn't expect that Chu Fengmian, who was like an ant in his eyes, would grow so fast. In an instant, the shock in Xiao Di's eyes was replaced by boundless killing intent. Xiao Di's figure flickered as he chased after Chu Fengmian. Damn it, this young emperor's strength is just too terrifying. He's much stronger than an ordinary half-step celestial being. Chu Fengmian's face darkened when he saw Xiao Di chasing after him. Although his strength had improved tremendously, the young emperor's strength was even more terrifying. The young emperor was invincible among the half-step celestial realm experts. They were much stronger than experts like the 5 elements saber sage. Chu Fengmian couldn't hurt Xiao Di no matter how hard he tried. However, even Chu Fengmian found it difficult to withstand a casual attack from the Xiao Di. His body shook as he was bombarded continuously. The perfect defense formed by the crystallized flesh was about to be broken bit by bit. 10 directions destruction. Rumble. Xiao Di suddenly let out a long roar, and a destructive force descended from all directions around Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian was at the center of the destruction, and the force was about to destroy everything in the world. 10 directions sky demon's extinction. Xiao Di has mastered an immortal technique. Chu Fengmian's expression changed drastically. This move was definitely an immortal technique, the ultimate killing move of the 10 directions sky demon, the ancestor of the demons. The young emperor had already mastered this move. Under this 10 directions collapse, even a half-step celestial being realm expert could be directly killed. Xiao Di's strength was already terrifying to begin with, and now he was using an immortal technique to kill Chu Fengmian with a single move. Chu Fengmian was extremely nervous. He knew that once he was hit by this move, he would lose everything. Even though Chu Fengmian had the Dragon Emperor's bloodline, a half-step immortal true body, an invincible defense formed by 129,600 crystallized flesh, and the support of the most powerful divine tree in the world, 10 directions destruction was inevitable. Even Chu Fengmian would die without a doubt under this 10 directions collapse. In the face of absolute power, no matter how many fortuitous encounters one had, they were all meaningless. Both swords were drawn, and sword intent soared into the sky. Bloodline, the power of the divine tree, the natal sword energy, and the power of creation. Chu Fengmian's endless power and countless adventures were all displayed at this moment. Even the Emperor Jar was used by Chu Fengmian. It turned into an ancient halberd and condensed above Chu Fengmian's head. Oh? Your extreme Dao celestial weapon seems to have become more complete. It seems like you must have obtained other fragments during this period of time. Xiao Di also noticed that the halberd above Chu Fengmian's head was transformed from the jar. But it's just as well. This ultimate immortal weapon must fall into my hands today. The stronger, the better. Xiao Di looked at Chu Fengmian with a ferocious smile and pointed a finger. Destruction. Rumble. The power of destruction around Chu Fengmian gathered to the extreme and came with Xiao Di's finger. Chu Fengmian's condensed spiritual power turned into countless barriers, but they couldn't withstand the terrifying power of destruction and were all broken. Whoosh! At this critical moment, a sword light suddenly flew out from the depths of the temple and slashed at the power of destruction around Chu Fengmian. A crack suddenly appeared in the invincible power of destruction due to this sword light. Soon after, a figure suddenly rushed out from the depths of the Buddhist temple. He grabbed Chu Fengmian and rushed into the depths of the Buddhist temple. Who's there? How dare you ruin my plan? Xiao Di roared furiously. Filled with rage, he slammed his palm down on the figure. However, the figure didn't stop. In the blink of an eye, several more sword lights flew out from the temple and collided with Xiao Di's palm. Chu Fengmian's expression changed rapidly when he saw the sword lights. He was incomparably familiar with the power of the sword light. It was none other than the sword light that Chu Fengmian had seen after searching his house in this Buddhist temple. He didn't know where the figure in front of him came from, but he was able to control the countless ancient sword lights in the temple. Xiao Di had to exert all his strength to resist the sword light. Come with me. An old voice sounded in Chu Fengmian's ears. His expression changed rapidly, but he didn't resist and allowed the mysterious figure to take him to the depths of the Pure Land Buddhist temple. Chapter 1663. Damn it! After Xiao Di destroyed countless sword lights, the mysterious man led Chu Fengmian into the depths of the Buddhist temple. In his eyes, there was incomparable anger and deep killing intent. This time, Chu Fengmian was originally in a situation of certain death, but unexpectedly, such a mysterious person suddenly intervened and saved Chu Fengmian. Since he's still in the temple, he can't escape. Xiao Di shouted angrily. His figure flickered and entered the depths of the Buddhist temple. At the same time, he sent out a message. All the demons in the Pure Land Buddhist temple received the message from Xiao Di and frantically searched for Chu Fengmian. On the other side, the mysterious man's escape light was extremely fast. He passed through countless areas and brought Chu Fengmian into the depths of the Pure Land Buddhist temple. The mysterious cultivator seemed to be extremely familiar with the temple of the Pure Land, as he was able to avoid the dangerous areas. Soon, they arrived at the deepest part of the Pure Land Buddhist temple. They came to a stop in a secret chamber. Chu Fengmian also saw the old man's appearance clearly. Chu Fengmian was very familiar with the old man's appearance. He was the old man who sold things in Guishu City. Chu Fengmian had bought the sword hilt, jade talisman, and the swordsmanship Chu Fengmian had just displayed, the 3 suns blazing sword. They were the 3 most precious treasures of the Sword Emperor. Chu Fengmian recognized the old man's voice. Therefore, when the old man took him away, Chu Fengmian didn't resist, and let him take him to the Pure Land Buddhist temple. "May I know who you are?" Chu Fengmian looked at the old man and hurriedly bowed. The old man's strength was unfathomable. Being able to save Chu Fengmian from Xiao Di meant that he was definitely a half-step celestial being expert. Even Chu Fengmian couldn't see through the old man's strength, let alone the old man. Chu Fengmian had to respect the old man since he had saved him this time. "Don't be so restrained. My name is Fan, but the world should know me as Tai Chu." The old man looked at Chu Fengmian and sized him up. There was some satisfaction in his eyes. "Indeed, with your comprehension of the way of the sword, it is sufficient for you to comprehend the 3 suns raging flame sword. Looks like this old man did not choose the wrong person." This old man deliberately handed the 3 suns raging flame sword to me? When Chu Fengmian heard the old man's words, he was inwardly shocked. Judging from the old man's words, it was likely that the old man had passed the ancient book to Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian could comprehend the 3 suns raging flame sword from the ancient book. The sudden increase in power of the 3 suns raging flame sword was most likely related to this old man. Fan, Tai Chu Fan was a one-word name. Chu Fengmian had never heard of this person before. In the ancient records of the 9 regions, there shouldn't be such an expert, but absolute beginning, senior, what is your relationship with the primordial sword? Chu Fengmian suddenly asked. Apart from the Tri-Sun blazing flame sword, which was the strongest sword emperor's immortal art, Chu Fengmian had acquired a few other things in the Sinkhole City. The hilt of the primordial sword. It was the primordial sword, one of the 4 ultimate immortal weapons of the strongest sword emperor. If the old man said that the world knew his name as Tai Chu, then he definitely had something to do with the primordial sword. As Chu Fengmian sized up the old man's aura, he vaguely thought of a possibility in his mind. This old man is the weapon spirit of the primordial sword. Fan didn't avoid the topic and spoke directly. Weapon spirit. Chu Fengmian's guess was confirmed when he heard Fan's words. When he heard the name Tai Chu, Chu Fengmian guessed that the old man in front of him was the weapon spirit of the primordial sword. What surprised Chu Fengmian was that a mere weapon spirit possessed such terrifying power. He actually had the power to rescue Chu Fengmian from the young emperor's hands. Such an expert was only a weapon spirit? It was possible for any powerful spirit weapon to give birth to a weapon spirit. It was extremely rare for a weapon spirit to be born with consciousness. Most of the weapon spirits only had a vague consciousness. Only the Cloud Feather Palace had given birth to Elder Yun. However, Elder Yun's strength was far from Fan's. How could the weapon spirit of an ultimate immortal weapon possess such frightening strength? Chu Fengmian couldn't help but wonder. Kid, it looks like you really don't know what an ultimate immortal weapon is. If this guy in front of you hadn't lost his strength, the young emperor would have had to flee with his tail between his legs even if he didn't die. How would he dare to fight him? Xing Xian's voice sounded in his mind at this moment. Chu Fengmian was used to Xing Xian's sudden appearance. Xing Xian was usually in a deep slumber and would only suddenly awaken when something piqued his interest. Is Elder Fan really that powerful? Chu Fengmian was taken aback by Xing Xian's words. Judging from Xing Xian's words, Fan wasn't at his peak yet. If Fan was at his peak, would he be even more powerful than the young emperor? The young emperor's strength was almost at the peak of the half-step celestial realm. He was just one step away from the celestial realm. Didn't that mean that Fan's strength was equivalent to the celestial realm at his peak? And weapon spirit could reach the celestial realm? Chu Fengmian found it hard to imagine. Kid, it looks like you still don't know what an ultimate immortal weapon is. Why do you think there are so few of them in the world? No matter how powerful a spirit weapon is, it's still a far cry from an extreme Dao immortal weapon. Xing Xian explained to Chu Fengmian without keeping him in suspense. There's one thing about an ultimate immortal weapon. The weapon spirit possesses the strength of the celestial realm. In other words, the weapon spirit of any ultimate immortal weapon is a celestial realm expert. Even if it doesn't have a master, it's still an absolute powerhouse. In fact, some powerful ultimate immortal weapons have never had a master in their entire lives because they themselves are invincible overlord. Any extreme Dao immortal weapon belonged to a celestial realm elite. Chu Fengmian was deeply shocked. An ultimate immortal weapon was a celestial realm expert. A tyrannical ultimate immortal weapon could even be an overlord. The tyrannical power of an ultimate immortal weapon was recorded in ancient books, but this was the first time Chu Fengmian had heard of it. It was no wonder that Xing Xian had said that if Fan Xian had been at his peak, the young emperor would have had no choice but to flee with his tail between his legs. No matter how strong the young emperor was, he was only a half-step celestial realm expert. He couldn't compete with a true celestial realm expert. Chapter 1664. Thank you for saving me, Elder Fan. Chu Fengmian looked at the old man in front of him and bowed again. He thanked the old man. In the face of such an expert, especially one who had just helped Chu Fengmian once, Chu Fengmian had to be respectful. It's all right. As the successor of the first Sword Emperor, it's only right for me to save you. After all, it wasn't easy to find a good seedling, and I don't want you to die halfway. Elder Fan looked at Chu Fengmian and said with a smile, "The successor of the first Sword Emperor?" Hearing Elder Fan's words, Chu Fengmian's eyes revealed some doubts, but he soon understood. It seemed that Elder Fan had deliberately sold the ancient book, Sword Hilt, and Jade Talisman in the returning ruined city. He was probably choosing a successor for the first Sword Emperor. The mysteries of these three treasures were simply impossible for ordinary people to guess. Only those who had reached Chu Fengmian's level of sword comprehension could see the extraordinariness of these treasures. In addition, Elder Fan had offered a sky-high price. Those who couldn't comprehend the mysteries wouldn't be willing to spend a sky-high price to buy a pile of trash, no matter how rich they were. Chu Fengmian was willing to buy these three treasures because he had seen through the mysteries within. When Elder Fan saw Chu Fengmian use the Three Suns blazing sword, he also knew that Chu Fengmian had comprehended the mysteries within and completed his consideration. I didn't expect that at such a critical moment there would really be someone who meets the requirement. It seems that the Sword Emperor's inheritance won't end with me. Elder Fan stared at Chu Fengmian with incomparable joy in his eyes and sighed with emotion. As the sword spirit of the Taichu sword, Elder Fan naturally knew how difficult it was to inherit the first Sword Emperor's inheritance. It had an almost impossible requirement for a martial artist's sword comprehension. Elder Fan originally thought that no one was qualified to inherit the first Sword Emperor's inheritance. Now that he saw Chu Fengmian, he was incomparably happy. Little guy, you have cultivated the Three-Sun Raging Flame sword. Now you can be considered as the inheritor of the first Sword Emperor. However, the Three Sun Raging Flames sword can only be considered as the most superficial move among the countless sword techniques of the First Sword Emperor. The inheritance of the First Sword Emperor, I have only passed down 2 moves. The first move is the Three Sun Raging Flame sword. The second move is the 4 Hurricane sword. I can only teach you this move. As long as you are willing to become the successor of the First Sword Emperor, I will teach you this move. Old Man Fan looked at Chu Fengmian with a serious look in his eyes. However, you have to consider carefully. The number 1 Sword Emperor died in the hands of his enemies. Once you obtain the inheritance of the number 1 Sword Emperor, those enemies will not let you go. I am willing, Chu Fengmian said without any hesitation. The number 1 Sword Emperor's enemy? Chu Fengmian already had a lot of enemies, so he didn't mind having more. The number 1 Sword Emperor was an expert that stood at the pinnacle of the sword Dao. Just the might of the Three Sun Raging Flames sword was already so terrifying. If Chu Fengmian could obtain all of his inheritance, it would definitely be a great opportunity for him. As for the enemies that Old Man Fan mentioned, Chu Fengmian was the only survivor of the Sword Dao sect. Even the experts in the 9 domains of heaven were his enemies. So what if there were a few more of them? Alright. Old Man Fan laughed when he saw Chu Fengmian agree so readily. It seems that I have not misjudged you. You have the heart of an expert that is not afraid of strong enemies. Your future achievements may not be inferior to the number 1 Sword Emperor. I will teach you the 4 Hurricane sword right now. Old Man Fan waved his hand. Suddenly, a jade talisman condensed in front of Chu Fengmian. The moment Chu Fengmian grabbed the jade talisman, a scene suddenly appeared in his mind. It was still a starry sky. Chu Fengmian had seen this scene before. It was the scene of the number 1 Sword Emperor facing countless wild beasts. It seemed to be the follow-up of the Three Sun Raging Flames sword that Chu Fengmian had observed. Now, Chu Fengmian also knew that this mysterious invincible expert was the number 1 Sword Emperor. It was enough to see the number 1 Sword Emperor's boundless confidence. He never felt that anyone could surpass him. The Three Sun Raging Flames sword was pure fire spiritual energy. The 4 Hurricane sword was pure wind spiritual energy. When the number 1 Sword Emperor made a move, a violent wind gathered in the sky. This violent wind was not wind, but sword chi. Thousands of sword chi condensed into a violent wind that swept everything. In this scene, the moment the 4 Hurricane sword was released, it was unknown how many tyrannical wild beasts were swept away by the sword chi hurricane. The scene in Chu Fengmian's mind came to an abrupt end at this moment. However, this battle was obviously not over. The other scenes should be the records of the other moves of the number 1 sword art. Xing Xian once said that the number 1 sword art was one of the top 10 ancient immortal art. There were a total of 5 moves. 3 suns, 4 directions, 6 directions, 8 desolations, and 9 revolutions. 3 suns was the 3 Sun Raging Flames sword. 4 directions was the 4 Hurricane sword. As for the remaining 6 directions, 8 desolations, and 9 revolutions, Chu Fengmian did not know the name of the current move. Even Xing Xian had only heard of this move. He still did not know the specific name. According to the records, each of the 5 moves of the number 1 sword art was more tyrannical than the previous one. Even if Chu Fengmian had only slightly comprehended the 4 directions Hurricane sword, he could vaguely feel that the power of this move surpassed that of the 3 Sun Raging Flames sword. However, relatively speaking, the difficulty of using the 4 directions Hurricane sword was far greater than that of the 3 Sun Raging Flames sword. Chu Fengmian had just checked the 3 Sun Raging Flames sword and felt that he had comprehended some of its essence. However, Chu Fengmian would need at least a day to comprehend the essence of this 4 directions Hurricane sword and use it for himself. How is the 4 directions Hurricane sword? Elder Fan had been watching Chu Fengmian from the side. When he saw that Chu Fengmian had awakened, he asked with a smile. Compared to the three-sun raging flame sword, it is stronger, but also more difficult to comprehend. Chu Fengmian told the truth. Chu Fengmian's sword Dao comprehension had reached an extremely terrifying level. Even many celestial realm sword cultivators might not be able to surpass Chu Fengmian's sword Dao comprehension. However, when he saw the Four Directions Hurricane Sword, Chu Fengmian also felt that it would take a long time for him to comprehend and master this move. Of course, I'm afraid that even a true celestial realm sword cultivator might not be able to comprehend this Four Directions Hurricane Sword. If it weren't for the fact that you have already comprehended the three-sun raging flames sword to a proficient level, this old man might not have imparted this move to you. Elder Fan looked at Chu Fengmian and smiled. He was not surprised by Chu Fengmian's answer. In fact, there was even an extremely satisfied look in his eyes. Although Chu Fengmian had only glanced at it, he had already memorized the Four Directions Hurricane Sword and was considered to have entered the door. Chapter 1665. You can meditate on the Four Cardinal Hurricane Sword here. Elder Fan looked at Chu Fengmian and said calmly, "Meditate here? No." Chu Fengmian opened his eyes and shook his head. Meditating on the Four Cardinal Hurricane Sword would be a great help to Chu Fengmian. If this move was used when the young emperor was not prepared for it, it might even injure the young emperor in one move. However, it would take at least a day to meditate on the Four Cardinal Hurricane Sword. Chu Fengmian didn't have that much time to waste. Chu Fengmian had taken the risk to enter the Buddhist temple of the Pure Land for the fragment of the Emperor Jar. If Shao Di got his hands on the Emperor Jar fragment, it would be troublesome. Chu Fengmian's dream of reshaping the Emperor Jar had been completely shattered. The fragments of the Emperor Jar had the ability to sense each other, which was why Chu Fengmian could sense the fragment in Yan Jun's hand. That was where the fragment of the Emperor Jar was, in the Pure Land Buddhist temple. If Shao Di got his hands on the fragment, Chu Fengmian wouldn't be able to hide from him. Unless Chu Fengmian abandoned the Emperor Jar, Shao Di would hunt him down endlessly. No matter what, Chu Fengmian couldn't let Shao Di get his hands on the fragment of the Emperor Jar. Elder Fan, do you know that there is such a fragment in the Pure Land Buddhist temple? Chu Fengmian's mind stirred and the Emperor Jar slowly condensed in his palm. Then, one of the fragments flew out and floated in front of Elder Fan. Oh? The Emperor Jar? No wonder you came all the way here. It seems like you're here for one of the fragments of the Emperor's Jar. Elder Fan glanced at Chu Fengmian and wasn't surprised to see the Emperor Jar. As the weapon spirit of an extreme immortal weapon, he could clearly sense the power of the Emperor Jar in Chu Fengmian's possession. Moreover, Chu Fengmian hadn't concealed his strength when he was in a stalemate with Shao Di. Elder Fan naturally saw it clearly. The fragment of the Emperor Jar is buried with my true form and the remains of Demon Emperor Shuexia. My true form is suppressing the remains of Demon Emperor Shuexia. Elder Fan said. Elder Fan's true body? When Chu Fengmian heard this, a sword hilt appeared in Chu Fengmian's hand. It was the hilt of the Taichu sword. Elder Fan was the weapon spirit of the Taichu sword. The body he was referring to was the Taichu sword. The hilt of the Taichu sword is in your hands, but the tip of the Taichu sword has been suppressing the Demon Emperor. Master used to be the #1 sword sovereign and killed the evil blood Devil Emperor. However, the evil blood Devil Emperor had already cultivated an invincible devil body. His soul was killed by Master, but his remains remained. His remains contain an extremely tyrannical strength. Later, when the first Sword Emperor killed the Bloodlust Demon Emperor, he suppressed me, the primordial sword, and the remains of the Bloodlust Demon Emperor. He tried to use hundreds of thousands of years to wear down the power of the remains of the Bloodlust Demon Emperor. However, I did not expect the power of the evil blood Demon Emperor's skeleton to be so strong that it was about to break through the suppression of the Taichu sword. In fact, it even broke the Taichu sword. In a moment of desperation, I left to look for a successor, and I happened to run into you. Elder Fan's eyes were extremely solemn when he said this. The bloodlust demon emperor was killed by the first sword sovereign? Elder Fan's words seemed to have revealed the most mysterious secret. According to the records, the bloodlust demon Emperor Gu's death was due to the Buddhist sect. He had attacked the Buddhist sect and died in the end. However, he had actually died in the hands of the first sword sovereign. Moreover, the bloodlust demon emperor and the first sword sovereign were both ninth order immortals. They were invincible figures in the immortal emperor realm. The first sword sovereign was able to kill the bloodlust demon emperor. Did that mean that there were strong and weak immortal emperors? The first sword sovereign had dominated countless eras and could be said to be invincible. The bloodlust demon emperor was not worth mentioning in front of the first sword sovereign. Elder Fan said coldly when he saw the bewilderment in Chu Fengmian's eyes. Even so, the first sword sovereign had still fallen. An expert who could kill an immortal emperor had still fallen. Chu Fengmian could not imagine what kind of existence could kill the first sword sovereign. However, Chu Fengmian's master, the master of sword Dao, was also an invincible existence in Chu Fengmian's eyes, but he had still fallen. There had never been a truly invincible person in the world. Chu Fengmian thought about this, but did not continue speaking. Although the bloodlust demon emperor is dead, his physical body is still here. In order to prevent his body from causing trouble, my true form was suppressed in the bloodlust demon emperor's body. However, there was an unforeseen event later. The primordial sword was shattered and could no longer suppress the bloodlust demon emperor's body. As a result, the Pure Land Buddhist temple suddenly appeared. Elder Fan's tone was grave. The primordial sword and the fragments of the emperor jar must not fall into the hands of the demons. The primordial sword's blade was suppressing the bloodlust demon emperor's body. After hearing Elder Fan's words, Chu Fengmian understood why he only had the hilt of the primordial sword in his hand. The primordial sword's blade had been suppressing the bloodlust demon emperor's body all this time. And the young emperor had come for the bloodlust demon emperor's body. It seemed that the young emperor had not given up on the idea of attaining an immortal body. Chu Fengmian had also heard some rumors about the young emperor in Long Maluo's memories. It was said that the young emperor had long had the opportunity to ascend to the celestial realm, but he had never tried. Instead, he had planned to condense an immortal body when he was half-step into the celestial realm. Once he had condensed an immortal body when he was half-step into the celestial realm, he would gain great benefits the moment he stepped into the celestial realm. It was the same as ascending to the heavens in a single step in the quasi-emperor realm and becoming Emperor Gu. The young emperor had planned to obtain the bronze heavenly demon skeleton and use it to condense an immortal body. However, the skeleton had fallen into Chu Fengmian's hands in the end. Therefore, the young emperor's goal this time was the skeleton of the bloodlust demon emperor. Moreover, the bloodlust demon emperor's era was only a few 100,000 years from the present. He was only a figure of the ancient era. The power contained in the skeleton he left behind was even more terrifying than that of the bronze heavenly demon skeleton. Then we should go fight for it now. At the very least, we have to get the primordial sword and the fragments of the emperor jar. Chu Fengmian's eyes flashed as he spoke. The young emperor's current strength was already incomparably terrifying. If he were to obtain the primordial sword and the fragments of the emperor jar as well, at that time, Chu Fengmian would be hunted down by the young emperor, and his death would be certain. Chapter 1666. Don't worry. There are still 3 days before the demon emperor's body is born. The young emperor won't be able to fight for it during these 3 days. Elder Fan said calmly when he saw how anxious Chu Fengmian was. Even if the demon emperor is dead, his remains still contain such terrifying power. The young emperor won't dare to act rashly. The skeleton will be at its weakest in 3 days. Only then will the young emperor make a move to snatch the remains of the demon emperor. That will be the best time for you to take the Taichu blade and the Renhuang jar fragment from the remains. You can cultivate well during these 3 days. This is a unique area in the Pure Land Buddhist temple. The young emperor won't be able to find this place. 3 days should be enough for me to comprehend the 4 cardinal hurricane sword. Chu Fengmian thought to himself. The 4 cardinal hurricane sword was more difficult to comprehend than the 3 suns blazing sword. However, Chu Fengmian was already a beginner. It wouldn't take long for him to fully comprehend it. 3 days was enough. It's a pity that I've already used up a lot of my power. I can only delay the young emperor for a minute at most. If I can recover some of my power, I'll be able to help you deal with the young emperor. That way, you'll have a better chance of getting the primordial sword and the emperor jar fragment. Elder Fan said regretfully. He was a weapon spirit. If it didn't recognize him as its master, he'd lose some of his power. He'd already used up a lot of his power to save Chu Fengmian from the young emperor. It was extremely difficult for him to face the young emperor. Delaying him for a minute was already his limit. Recover my power? Chu Fengmian suddenly thought of something when he heard Elder Fan's words. He opened the empty ring. A sacred grade spirit stone appeared in Chu Fengmian's hand. I wonder if this spirit stone can restore Elder Fan's power? Spirit stone? Kid, you should know that it's useless unless it's a saint grade spirit stone. Elder Fan shook his head at Chu Fengmian's words. Suddenly, he looked at the spirit stone that Chu Fengmian handed over. The energy contained within this spiritual stone was incomparably pure. The entire spiritual stone was almost pure white. A saint-grade spirit stone? You actually have a saint-grade spirit stone? Elder Fan's expression changed. He was a little agitated, but he quickly shook his head. It's a pity that it's too little. If I want to recover my strength, I'll need a mountain of spiritual stones. That's easy. It's just saint-grade spirit stones. You can have as many as you want. Hearing Elder Fan's words, Chu Fengmian laughed out loud. Suddenly, he injected a stream of spiritual energy into the spatial ring and waved his hand. A large river suddenly gushed out in front of Chu Fengmian. The river was pure white in color. What flowed in the river was not water, but spirit stones. They were all saint-grade spirit stones of the highest quality. Among them, there were hundreds of millions of saint-grade spirit stones. Saint-grade spirit stone? So many? Old Man Fan seemed to be taken aback by this sudden development. Even he was stunned by the river of saint-grade spirit stones. Although the sacred grade spirit stone was almost useless to a celestial realm expert, Chu Fengmian was only an 8 tribulation Emperor Gu after all. In his opinion, Chu Fengmian wouldn't have many saint-grade spirit stones, even if he had them. But seeing Chu Fengmian take out a river of saint-grade spirit stones all at once, even he found it hard to believe. If that's not enough, there's more. In an instant, Chu Fengmian waved his hand again and again, opening the empty ring. Numerous white rivers flew out from the empty ring. Chu Fengmian had a divine pulse. Usually, he would constantly condense spiritual stones. Over time, a large number of saint-grade spirit stones accumulated in his spatial ring. Many of these saint-grade spirit stones were used by Chu Fengmian to activate the Emperor Jar, or to leave them for the Sword Principal Sect. Now that Elder Fan needed them, Chu Fengmian took them all out at once. Chu Fengmian had seen Elder Fan's strength. Although it wasn't enough to defeat the young emperor, it was enough to contend with him. Chu Fengmian's current strength was invincible among the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. If Elder Fan took action, he could delay the young emperor. Not to mention the primordial sword and the fragments of the Emperor Jar, Chu Fengmian even had a chance to fight for the young emperor's skeleton, which the young emperor wanted. Last time, Chu Fengmian had snatched the bronze heavenly demon skeleton from the young emperor. He had used the divine tree to devour the bronze heavenly demon skeleton, which allowed him to cultivate a half-step immortal real body. This time, if he could obtain the demon emperor's skeleton, it was almost certain that he would be able to cultivate an immortal real body. As long as Elder Fan could delay the young emperor, it might not be impossible. Although this matter was very risky, should it succeed, the benefits that Chu Fengmian would obtain could be said to be enormous. The value of all the treasures in the treasury might not be higher than the demon emperor's skeleton. I only need one of these spirit stones. It's useless to have more unless they're of a higher grade. Otherwise, I can only recover about 10% of my strength. Elder Fan waved his hand and took one of the river of Saint-grade spirit stones, then refined it. However, Elder Fan's true form was a top-tier immortal weapon after all. Saint-grade spirit stones could only restore 10% of his strength at most. If he wanted to recover more strength, he'd need more than just Saint-grade spirit stones. He'd need divine-grade spirit stones or even the legendary immortal stones. Of course, it was a pleasant surprise for Chu Fengmian to recover 10% of his strength. If Elder Fan could recover 10% of his strength, he'd be a great help to Chu Fengmian. Elder Fan, how long can you delay the young emperor with 10% of your strength? Chu Fengmian couldn't help but ask the elder. 5 minutes, but if the young emperor has some fortuitous encounters, 3 minutes might be the limit. Elder Fan thought for a moment, then answered. I've also left a restriction in the Pure Land Buddhist temple. Let me know once you've obtained the primordial sword and the fragments of the Emperor Jar. I'll take you out of the Pure Land Buddhist temple. 3 minutes is enough. Chu Fengmian's eyes were cold. For a martial artist of his level, 3 minutes was enough to accomplish many things. It was time for revenge. The young emperor had pursued Chu Fengmian time and time again, forcing him into desperate straits several times. Chapter 1667. After Elder Fan obtained the river of spiritual stones, he went to the side to refine it. Now, Chu Fengmian had 3 days left. The primordial sword had been suppressing the remains of the demon emperor. Therefore, no one knew better than Elder Fan when the remains of the demon emperor came into being. These 3 days were just enough for Chu Fengmian to comprehend the 4 cardinal hurricane sword. Chu Fengmian sat on the ground. The sword will of the divine sword realm rose from his back and shrouded his body. The scene that had just appeared in Chu Fengmian's mind. The scene of the first sword emperor killing countless wild beasts with the 4 cardinal hurricane sword. It appeared in Chu Fengmian's mind again and again. Chu Fengmian quietly watched the scene in front of him as he continuously practiced the sword technique in his mind. Time passed slowly. In Chu Fengmian's mind, the appearance of this scene became clearer and clearer. Beside Chu Fengmian, there was a gust of wind spiritual energy constantly revolving around Chu Fengmian. Sword aura. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Several sword auras immediately flew out from the world's edge sword box on Chu Fengmian's back and began to condense with the wind spiritual energy around him. Suddenly, it turned into a hurricane. This hurricane was formed by pure sword aura. Wherever it passed, nothing could stand in its way. Sword out. Boom. The ancestral dragon supreme sword was immediately unsheathed from Chu Fengmian's hand and suddenly slashed forward. Countless hurricanes appeared where the tip of the sword was, causing the power of the sword chi to erupt. There was no place in the inescapable net that could escape the sword aura's slashing. The 4 cardinal hurricane sword is complete. After striking out with the sword, Chu Fengmian slowly opened his eyes and stood up. The sword that he had just struck out was the 4 cardinal hurricane sword. The essence of the 4 cardinal hurricane sword was to condense thousands of sword auras into one and condense their power into a single point. However, it also had the effect of thousands of sword auras besieging at the same time, making it difficult to resist. Compared to the Tri-Sun blazing sword, This move was even more bizarre, and the power that erupted was even more tyrannical. Moreover, the World's Edge sword box on Chu Fengmian's back was already nourishing a lot of sword auras. The moment these sword auras struck out together with the 4 cardinal hurricane sword, it was enough to cause the strength of this 4-way hurricane sword to be a little stronger, its strength even greater. An ancient book appeared in front of Chu Fengmian. The words 9 realms were written on it. The 9 domains sword technique, an ancient sword Tao book. This was Chu Fengmian ancient sword. There were hundreds of 9 domains sword techniques. There were 9 domains sword ancient sword were recorded on each page. And on the last page, the newest page, it began to condense. The 4 cardinal hurricane sword. The 4 cardinal hurricane sword 4 cardinal sword was sword to be condensed swords to be used to be one of the 10 immortals immortal. Now, Chu Fengmian wanted to incorporate the 4-way hurricane sword into his 9 realms swordsmanship and transform it into his own power. Bang! The page of the 4 cardinal hurricane sword in the ancient sword manual was completed. Chu Fengmian sensed that the power contained in the ancient sword manual had become even more tyrannical the moment the page of the 4 cardinal hurricane sword was condensed. It took an entire day. Chu Fengmian opened his eyes and calculated the time. Now, after a day, Chu Fengmian had completely mastered the 4 directions hurricane sword. As for the next step of familiarization, it could only be practiced through battle after battle. Chu Fengmian's secluded cultivation was meaningless. There were only 2 days left of the 3 days. Chu Fengmian glanced at Elder Fan, who was still there, devouring the spirit stone to recover his strength. There was no sign of him waking up. Chu Fengmian thought for a moment and sat down again. However, this time, he wasn't going to practice the 4 directions hurricane sword. It was the 5th move of the 9 mystic immortal technique, 7 kills. Chu Fengmian had comprehended the 4th form of the 9 mystic immortal technique, the heavenly fortune, when he was at the sacred ground of the holy dragon mystical ground. Now that Chu Fengmian's strength had skyrocketed, he should have been able to comprehend the 5th form of the 9 mystic immortal technique. However, Chu Fengmian didn't have a quiet environment to comprehend it in the sacred ground. These 2 days were just enough for Chu Fengmian to comprehend the 5th form of the 9 mystic immortal technique, the 7 kills. The 4th form of the 9 mystic immortal technique, the heavenly fortune, was a shocking killing technique. It gathered the power of the stars and infused it into the blade, turning it into a river of stars to kill the enemies within. When facing martial artists of the same realm, or martial artists of a lower realm, the power of this move would be disdainful. Once one was trapped in the sword chi galaxy, it was almost impossible to escape. However, this move wasn't very useful against experts like Xiao Di, who were stronger than Chu Fengmian. Xiao Di's strength could easily tear the sword chi galaxy apart. The 5th form of the 9 mystic immortal technique was completely different from the 4th form. The 7 kills was an absolute killing move. It was the most powerful move apart from the last form of the 9 mystic immortal technique, the army destroyer. It was a pure killing move without any fancy move. Such a move would have the best effect when facing a powerhouse. If Chu Fengmian's opponent was Xiao Di, then he had to comprehend the 5th form of the 9 mystic immortal technique, the 7 kills. As for time, 2 days was more than enough. A confident smile appeared in Chu Fengmian's eyes. He closed his eyes and focused. In his mind, a star domain appeared. The star domain filled the sky. It was a star map drawn by observing the stars with the 9 mystic immortal art. The 7 forms of the 9 mystic immortal technique were hidden in this star map. Only when one's martial understanding reached a certain level would they be able to see the mysteries of the star map. Currently, the 4 stars on the star map were already extremely bright. These 4 stars represented the first 4 forms of the 9 mystic immortal technique that Chu Fengmian had already learned. Voracious Wolf, Giant Gate, Lucid Fortune, and Heavenly Fortune. Now, there was a fifth star in the star map that was shining brightly. However, the light from this move was slightly weaker than the light from the previous 4 moves. Chu Fengmian knew that this meant that he was qualified to comprehend the 5th form of the 9 Mystic Immortal Technique. Chu Fengmian's mind stirred. A huge hand appeared in his mind and suddenly grabbed at the 5th star. Chapter 1668. The stars twinkled. The moment Chu Fengmian grabbed the 5th star, the power of the stars erupted behind him. The power of the stars condensed into 2 large characters. 7 kills. The 2 characters condensed the power of the stars to the extreme, cutting through everything like a sharp blade. The ancient sword art book in front of Chu Fengmian suddenly flew out and flipped to the last page. The newest page began to condense. The power of this page was almost no less than the newly condensed page of the 4-sided hurricane sword art. The 2 words 7 kills appeared on the screen. The 2 blood-red characters were enough to strike fear into anyone who saw them. The 9 profound immortal art, or rather, the 5th style of the 9 profound immortal art, 7 kills, had been completely condensed in the ancient sword art book. Chu Fengmian slowly opened his eyes as a faint smile appeared on his face. After comprehending these 2 sword arts, Chu Fengmian would be more confident in his confrontation with the young emperor. Now, 2.5 days had already passed. Chu Fengmian opened his eyes and saw that Elder Fan was already standing beside him. Old Fan had already completely devoured and refined the river of spiritual stones. His aura was now a lot stronger than before. He was no less powerful than when he fought the young emperor. Although he had only recovered about 10% of his strength, his current strength was already extremely terrifying. After all, his true strength was in the celestial realm. Even if he had only recovered 10% of his strength, he still had the strength of a half-step celestial realm expert. "How's your comprehension?" Elder Fan asked curiously when he saw that Chu Fengmian had awakened. There was a hint of curiosity in his eyes, as well as a hint of anticipation. Elder Fan had already regarded Chu Fengmian as the successor of the first Sword Emperor. He had even taught Chu Fengmian the 4-sided hurricane sword art. However, he also doubted whether Chu Fengmian could comprehend this sword art. After all, the 4-sided hurricane sword art was a sword art that many celestial realm sword cultivators might not be able to comprehend. "I've already comprehended it." Chu Fengmian smiled casually. "I can barely perform it." Upon hearing Chu Fengmian's words, Old Man Fan suddenly had a suspicious look on his face. In terms of difficulty, the 4-sided hurricane sword was several times more difficult than the 3 Suns scorching sword. He also doubted that Chu Fengmian could comprehend the 4-sided hurricane sword in just 3 days. Chu Fengmian chuckled when he saw the suspicion in Elder Fan's eyes. He clenched his hand and the ancestral dragon supreme sword was immediately unsheathed from the world's edge sword box. At the same time, dozens of sword chi shot out. Rumble! The sword aura circled around the spirit sword in Chu Fengmian's hand, and he immediately slashed at Old Man Fan. Countless sword chi and wind spiritual energy gathered together to form a hurricane that crushed everything in its path. The sword aura turned into a hurricane. Elder Fan couldn't help but take a few steps back to avoid its sharpness. "This is 4 Directions Hurricane Sword?" Old Fan, who had followed the number 1 Sword Emperor for a long time, could tell at a glance that this move was the omnidirectional hurricane sword. However, Old Man Fan had never imagined that Chu Fengmian would actually be able to comprehend the 4 cardinal hurricane sword in just 3 days. Old Man Fan knew how difficult it was to comprehend the 4 cardinal hurricane sword. The former number 1 Sword Emperor had also thought about passing down his sword technique. However, countless geniuses had failed to meet the requirements of the number 1 Sword Emperor. One of the simplest requirements was the comprehension of sword principles. The requirement for the 3 suns blazing sword was 1 day. The requirement for the 4 cardinal hurricane sword was 5 days. Although Chu Fengmian had already comprehended the 3 suns blazing sword, Old Man Fan wasn't by his side at that time. Therefore, no one knew how long it took Chu Fengmian to comprehend the 3 suns blazing sword. However, the 4 cardinal hurricane sword was something that Old Man Fan had just imparted to Chu Fengmian. Now, in just 3 days, no 2.5 days, Chu Fengmian had already comprehended the 4 cardinal hurricane sword and was even able to perform it. This was twice as fast as the time that the number 1 sword emperor had set. Old Man Fan's eyes were filled with horror. He had followed the number 1 sword emperor and had seen many talented sword Dao geniuses from one era after another. However, none of them could be compared to Chu Fengmian. After forcing Old Man Fan to retreat, Chu Fengmian's mind moved and the sword aura hurricane dissipated with a loud bang. He naturally didn't want to hurt Old Man Fan. Just now, the suspicion in Old Man Fan's eyes made Chu Fengmian a little unhappy, so he deliberately performed the 4 cardinal hurricane sword to shock Old Man Fan. Now, looking at Old Man Fan's expression, he was indeed completely shocked. 2.5 days. Old Man Fan stared at Chu Fengmian and was speechless for a long time. Chu Fengmian's sword Dao aptitude was much more terrifying than he had imagined. Young Master's sword Dao aptitude is really unparalleled in the world. This old man was also a frog in a well. I shouldn't have doubted you, young Master. Please forgive me. Old Man Fan looked at Chu Fengmian and said respectfully. He had also changed the way he addressed Chu Fengmian to young lord. The contempt he had for Chu Fengmian before had completely disappeared. Previously, Old Man Fan had recognized Chu Fengmian as the successor of the number 1 sword emperor. In fact, he was somewhat forced to do so. After all, at this critical juncture, Old Man Fan couldn't find a sword cultivator who was more outstanding than Chu Fengmian, so it could only be Chu Fengmian. But now, after seeing Chu Fengmian comprehend the 4 cardinal hurricane sword in 2.5 days, Old Man Fan's disdain for Chu Fengmian had completely disappeared. Elder Fan's contempt for Chu Fengmian had completely disappeared. He had completely recognized Chu Fengmian as the young lord who was qualified to inherit the sword arts of the first sword emperor. You flatter me, Old Man Fan. Chu Fengmian smiled and didn't say anything else. Mastering the 4 cardinal hurricane sword in 2.5 days had already shocked Old Man Fan to such an extent. Fortunately, Chu Fengmian didn't say that he had only spent a day to comprehend the complete 4 cardinal hurricane sword. If he did, Old Man Fan would probably think Chu Fengmian was a freak. Good. With the young master, the sword technique inheritance of the number 1 sword emperor will never be broken. This time, the young master will definitely obtain the primordial blade and the fragment of the emperor jar. Old Man Fan's eyes were full of confidence. In this Buddhist temple of the Pure Land, he had always kept the remains of demon Emperor Shuexia. The streaks of sword qi in this Buddhist temple of the Pure Land were also his eyes. In this Buddhist temple of the Pure Land, there were also a large number of demon experts in addition to the young master. However, with Chu Fengmian's current strength and the power of the 4 cardinal hurricane sword, he could even kill a demon expert at the peak of the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. Chapter 1669. There's no time to lose. Let's go now, young master. Elder Fan looked at Chu Fengmian and said hurriedly. Half a day later was when the power of demon Emperor Shuexia's skeleton was at its weakest. However, the young emperor might make a move earlier and gain the upper hand. All right. Chu Fengmian nodded and followed Elder Fan through the interior of the Pure Land Buddhist Temple. The interior of the Pure Land Buddhist Temple was extremely complicated. It was even more chaotic because of the battle between the first Sword Emperor and Demon Emperor Shuexia. Without Elder Fan, it would be difficult for Chu Fengmian to find the center of the Pure Land Buddhist temple even with the help of the Emperor Jar. There were countless pure demonic wills inside the Pure Land Buddhist temple, which gave birth to many demons. Wherever Chu Fengmian and Elder Fan passed, many demons appeared and attacked them. However, many of these demons didn't even have the strength of Emperor Gu. Chu Fengmian didn't even need to make a move. With a shift of his mind, several sword auras flew out from the World's Edge sword case on his back and killed all the demons. It's a pity that there aren't any powerful demons that I can use my newly comprehended swordsmanship. Chu Fengmian had just comprehended the Sword of the Four Winds and the fifth move of the Nine Profound Immortal Art, Everlasting. He wanted to find some powerful demons to try, but unfortunately, the demons he encountered along the way were too weak. Chu Fengmian could crush them with a finger, so he didn't need to use his swordsmanship at all. Oh? Young master wants to try his swordsmanship? There are 2 peak 9 tribulation ancient emperors in front of us. I wonder if young lord is interested? Elder Fan, who was beside Chu Fengmian, suddenly asked when he heard Chu Fengmian's muttering. Inside the Pure Land Buddhist temple, the streaks of sword chi were Old Man Fan's eyes and ears. Hence, Old Man Fan was well aware of the situation around him. 2 peak 9 tribulations Emperor Gu? Chu Fengmian's eyes lit up when he heard this. The peak 9 tribulations Emperor Gu was perfect for Chu Fengmian to practice his swordsmanship with. Their strength was enough to show the strength of the 2 new swordsmanship. Take me there. Chu Fengmian looked at Elder Fan and said. Since there was still half a day left, Chu Fengmian wasn't in a hurry to go. Moreover, they were merely 2 9 tribulations Emperor Gu's peak state devils. Chu Fengmian wouldn't need much time to kill them now. All right. Elder Fan nodded. With a wave of his hand, he grabbed Chu Fengmian and shuttled through the Pure Land Buddhist temple. Soon, a stone chamber appeared in front of Chu Fengmian. At a glance, one could see a large amount of treasures piled up in this stone chamber. The Pure Land Buddhist Temple used to be the noblest Buddhist temple in the Pure Land sect. Large amounts of wealth were gathered here. The treasures in the stone chamber were shocking. There were a large number of spirit stones piled up in the chamber. They were all spirit stones above the king grade. There were also quite a number of royal grade and saint grade spirit stones. However, Chu Fengmian's eyes were filled with disdain. Spirit stones were the most useless thing to him. Chu Fengmian had a divine pulse, so he could condense a large number of saint-grade spirit stones at any time. As long as Chu Fengmian's strength took another step forward, he could use his divine pulse to condense the legendary divine-grade spirit stones. Chu Fengmian didn't care about a large amount of wealth. Chu Fengmian's gaze fell on the 2 figures in the stone chamber. One of the figures was a middle-aged man with a cold and gloomy appearance. The moment one saw his face, one would shudder in fear. The moment he saw this figure, Chu Fengmian's eyes lit up with excitement. This middle-aged man with a cold and gloomy appearance was King Manticore. He was the demon race expert who had repeatedly targeted Chu Fengmian outside. At that time, if it weren't for his status, Chu Fengmian would have killed King Manticore. Now, Chu Fengmian actually encountered him in the Pure Land Buddhist temple. Beside the King Manticore, there was another figure. This figure was covered in white bones and looked like a withered skeleton. Such a skeleton was like a living person, possessing its own consciousness. This was a bone demon. The bone demon race was an extremely rare race of demons. It was said that after the death of some tyrannical demons, the resentment in their bones would condense and give birth to this race of demons. This kind of bone demon didn't know any martial techniques, but had an incomparably sturdy skeletal body. It was like a human warrior who cultivated the path of body refinement. Now, Bone Demon and King Manticore were continuously collecting the treasures in the stone chamber. Chu Fengmian didn't care about these spirit stones, but to them it was a huge fortune. It was enough to exchange for many treasures outside. Just as the 2 of them were happily collecting the treasures, a figure suddenly appeared. A tyrannical sword intent shrouded the stone chamber without any concealment. Who is it? A human warrior? King Manticore and Bone Demon turned their heads. The moment they saw Chu Fengmian, their eyes widened in surprise. The moment they saw Chu Fengmian's face, the surprise in their eyes turned into excitement. Chu Fengmian? The two of them hadn't seen Chu Fengmian before, but after Chu Fengmian was rescued by Elder Fan, the young emperor gave the order to pursue Chu Fengmian in this Buddhist temple. Under the young emperor's order, Chu Fengmian's appearance became known to all demons in the Buddhist temple in the Pure Land. After a brief moment of surprise, the two of them became incomparably excited. Under the young emperor's order, anyone who could kill Chu Fengmian and bring his head to the young emperor would be rewarded handsomely. Chu Fengmian, I didn't expect you to still be in the Pure Land Buddhist temple. How dare you show yourself now? King Manticore stared at Chu Fengmian and roared greedily. Capture this kid, but don't kill him. Boom. In an instant, King Manticore and Bone Demon attacked at the same time. They gathered their spiritual energy and bombarded Chu Fengmian with killing moves. Billowing demonic will turned into enormous demonic claws in the air and grabbed at Chu Fengmian. Under the young emperor's order, the rewards of capturing Chu Fengmian were much greater than killing him. Chu Fengmian had escaped from the young emperor several times, which had already infuriated the young emperor. Of course, he wanted to kill Chu Fengmian personally. Seeing that Chu Fengmian was only in the realm of 8 tribulations Emperor Gu, King Manticore and Bone Demon wanted to capture him and get more rewards from the young emperor. Chapter 1670. They wanted to capture him alive? Chu Fengmian remained calm as he watched King Manticore and Bone Demon attack. He didn't take them seriously at all. In his opinion, King Manticore and Bone Demon would have a chance to threaten Chu Fengmian if they attacked immediately with their killing move. Capturing Chu Fengmian alive was a joke. Chu Fengmian had comprehended 2 new sword techniques. Even a half-step celestial realm expert like the 5 elements Saber Saint wouldn't be able to capture Chu Fengmian alive. Not to mention 2 demons who were at the peak of the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. Chu Fengmian sneered as he watched the demonic claws descending from the sky toward him. He didn't move at all. Several sword auras shot out from the world's edge sword case behind Chu Fengmian and soared into the sky. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. What a powerful sword aura! This brat's strength is indeed strange. King Manticore and Bone Demon weren't too surprised to see the demonic claws in the sky being destroyed. After all, Chu Fengmian was wanted by the young emperor. It seemed that he wasn't as simple as he seemed. Kill him! King Manticore and Bone Demon moved at the same time. They could tell that Chu Fengmian wasn't as weak as he seemed, so they immediately attacked with their killing moves. Killing Chu Fengmian would also earn them a reward from the young emperor. It was just that the reward would be less than capturing him alive. It was a great opportunity for them to encounter Chu Fengmian. Naturally, they couldn't let him go. 2 demonic figures rushed toward Chu Fengmian and bombarded him with their killing move. That's more like it. Chu Fengmian's lips curled into a smile. Chu Fengmian wasn't interested in using his sword if the 2 demons didn't use their full strength. Bone Demon? Looks like your body is quite sturdy. Let's test my sword techniques on you first. Chu Fengmian glanced around and his gaze landed on Guemo. He shouted coldly and unsheathed the ancestral dragon's supreme sword. Chu Fengmian held it tightly in his hand and charged towards Guemo. How dare you attack first? Seeing Chu Fengmian rush over, the Bone Devil sneered. The Bone Demon's weakness was that it was unable to use any martial skills. It could only fight with its physical body. Therefore, even though the Bone Devil's strength was incomparably tyrannical, it had to be close in order to attack others. When facing a Bone Devil, the best way was to increase the distance and prevent close combat. Now, Chu Fengmian rushed over directly. Close combat was when Bone Demon was at his strongest. Die. Facing Chu Fengmian's figure, the Bone Demon punched out. This was a punch of pure strength. The brute force of Bone Demon was almost not inferior to that of an expert half a step into the celestial being realm. The King Manticore stopped attacking Chu Fengmian when it saw the Bone Demon attack. It sneered at Chu Fengmian. Daring to engage in close combat with the Bone Demon was definitely courting death. In his opinion, Chu Fengmian would undoubtedly die under this punch. Just as the fist was about to hit Chu Fengmian, shocking sword will burst out from Chu Fengmian's body and condensed on the sword in his hand. Immediately, the aura on Chu Fengmian's body became completely different from before. The spiritual power of wind had unknowingly gathered on Chu Fengmian's sword. At the same time, the sword qi all over the sky was gathered and integrated into Chu Fengmian's sword. 4 directions hurricane sword. Boom. The sword in Chu Fengmian's hand immediately slashed down. The sword qi all over the sky burst out and turned into several sword qi hurricanes, sweeping over. Every corner of the stone room was swept by the sword qi hurricanes. Crack. Countless cracks appeared on the Bone Demon's fist the moment it collided with the sword qi hurricanes. Then, it was shattered by the power of the sword qi hurricanes. The Bone Demon's body was not inferior to a heaven-grade spiritual weapon. But now, starting from his fist, the Bone Demon's entire right arm was swept up by the sword qi hurricanes and mercilessly shattered. What kind of swordsmanship is this? Gu Mo's voice was filled with incomparable shock. His body was his strongest trump card. Even the tyrannical Emperor Gu of the 9 Tribulations dared not say that he could shatter his skeleton with one move. To shatter his bones with one blow, only an expert who was at least half a step away from the celestial being realm could possibly do it with a killing move. The 4 directions hurricane sword that Chu Fengmian used was comparable to a half-step celestial being expert. What a powerful swordsmanship! Chu Fengmian was also slightly surprised when he saw this scene. This was the first time Chu Fengmian used the 4 directions hurricane sword against an enemy. Chu Fengmian had expected that the Bone Demon would be able to withstand it. However, the Bone Demon's strongest body was not worth mentioning in front of the sword qi hurricanes. It was mercilessly crushed. The 4 directions hurricane sword was worthy of being the top sword emperor's swordsmanship. Its power was more terrifying than the 3 suns' scorching sword. Chu Fengmian's eyes lit up with joy. The stronger the 4 directions hurricane sword was, the more confident Chu Fengmian would be when facing a young emperor. This kid's strength is strange. Run! The Bone Demon shouted and retreated continuously, trying to get away from the sword qi hurricanes. Seeing this, Chu Fengmian's lips curled into a cold smile. The most powerful thing about the 4 directions hurricane sword was not the sharpness of the sword qi hurricanes. Instead, it was the tight encirclement that made it impossible to escape. Kill! Chu Fengmian said. Suddenly, the sword qi hurricanes around him slashed toward the Bone Demon. There was more than one sword qi hurricane produced by the 4 directions hurricane sword. Chu Fengmian only used one of the sword qi hurricanes to test the power of the sword qi hurricanes. Now the test was over. There was no need for the Bone Demon to live. Chu Fengmian would never show mercy to the Devil Clan. Rumble! 7 or 8 sword qi hurricanes bombarded the Bone Demon at the same time. The tight encirclement did not leave any gap for him to escape. No! The Bone Demon could only hide in a corner, trembling. He was completely crushed by the sword qi hurricanes. No matter how strong his body was, it was not worth mentioning in front of the sword qi hurricanes. Chu Fengmian killed the 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu's peak strength with one strike. This almost meant that the 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu's peak expert could not withstand a single blow from Chu Fengmian. Only the experts who were half a step away from the celestial realm could pose a threat to Chu Fengmian. On the other side, King Chimera watched all this with his mouth agape. He did not react until the Bone Demon was killed. The Bone Demon, who had the strongest body among the Devil Clan, was killed by Chu Fengmian with one strike. Chapter 1671. Chu Fengmian was surprised by King Manticore's actions. Chu Fengmian watched as the King Manticore flew out and stopped about 10 meters in front of Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian didn't attack. Instead, he looked at King Manticore with interest. "You're not planning to escape?" King Manticore had witnessed Chu Fengmian's strength, yet it didn't plan to escape? "I know. It's useless even if I escape." King Manticore looked at Chu Fengmian and said slowly, "Chu Fengmian, I know you have a grudge against Xiao Di. Don't you want to know what treasure Xiao Di is here for?" "Why? You want to tell me?" When Chu Fengmian heard the King Manticore's words, he didn't expect that the King Manticore would actually come to bargain with him. Compared to Long Maluo, who would rather die than submit, King Manticore took the initiative to negotiate with Chu Fengmian. "Chu Fengmian, you won't get anything out of killing me. As long as you let me go, I'm willing to tell you what treasure Xiao Di is here for. If you can get your hands on that treasure, it will be greatly beneficial to you." King Manticore's voice was full of temptation. It even had a hint of bewitchment. This was the second time Chu Fengmian felt this way, other than the mantra of Monk Zhuanlun. However, compared to Monk Zhuanlun's mantra, King Manticore's bewitchment was much weaker. Monk Zhuanlun's mantra was enough to shake Chu Fengmian's Dao heart. However, King Manticore only managed to bewitch Chu Fengmian. As for Chu Fengmian's Dao heart, it didn't move at all. However, Chu Fengmian wanted to see what King Manticore had to say. A hint of greed appeared on his face. "Tell me what treasure Xiao Di is here for. If you tell me, I'll spare your life." Seeing Chu Fengmian's reaction, King Manticore's face revealed a hint of viciousness. "The treasure the Crown Prince is talking about this time is actually your life." Halfway through his sentence, the King Manticore suddenly sneered. Almost at the same time, a gigantic scorpion tail pierced towards Chu Fengmian from behind. There was a poisonous stinger on the scorpion tail. It was extremely dazzling and emitting a deadly poison, and it pierced into Chu Fengmian's body. "Kid, you think you can kill me with your strength? The Bone Demon is dead, the reward is mine." King Manticore laughed maniacally when he saw the scorpion tail piercing into Chu Fengmian's body. "Tail, Manticore's tail. Not bad, it can be refined into a good weapon." Just as the King Manticore was laughing, Chu Fengmian's voice suddenly rang out. Chu Fengmian's silhouette suddenly appeared behind the King Manticore. He abruptly swung his sword at the scorpion tail on its back. Demonic blood spurted out as the scorpion tail was cut off by Chu Fengmian and fell to the ground. Chu Fengmian waved his hand and put it into his spatial ring. The Manticore clan's most powerful trait was the deadly poison on their bodies. The Manticore's poison was concentrated in the Manticore's scorpion tail. The Manticore's scorpion tail was usually invisible and hard to detect. Therefore, many warriors who didn't know about the Manticore clan weren't prepared for it. If one was stabbed by a Manticore's scorpion tail, they would die from the deadly poison. However, Chu Fengmian had inherited Long Maluo's memories. King Manticore was Long Maluo's sworn enemy, so he knew all about the Manticore's trick. King Manticore would pretend to be weak when faced with a strong enemy. It would deliberately approach them to mislead them and distract them before launching a sneak attack with its scorpion tail. If Chu Fengmian hadn't inherited Long Maluo's memories, King Manticore's sneak attack might have been effective. Unfortunately, Chu Fengmian had inherited Long Maluo's memories. Everything King Manticore had just done was like a clown's performance in Chu Fengmian's eyes. "Ah!" King Manticore screamed as its scorpion tail was chopped off. It immediately turned into a ray of light and fled for its life toward the entrance of the stone chamber. The Manticore's scorpion tail was the Manticore clan's most powerful weapon. With its scorpion tail chopped off, King Manticore didn't dare to fight Chu Fengmian anymore. Young master, we can't let it go. We don't want to alert the enemy. Elder Fan suddenly appeared beside Chu Fengmian and was about to intervene when he saw King Manticore's fleeing figure. No need. It can't escape. Chu Fengmian sneered and took a step forward. The power of the stars suddenly descended and condensed on the blade in Chu Fengmian's hand. Chu Fengmian had witnessed the power of the Sword of the Four Winds. However, Chu Fengmian wanted to test out the power of another sword technique. Sword of the Nine Mysteries. 7 kills. Rumble. The moment the power of the stars descended, it suddenly turned into tens of thousands of sword rays and condensed on the blade of Chu Fengmian's sword. In an instant, Chu Fengmian's blade expanded by thousands of times. It was as if there was no place in the heavens that could escape from Chu Fengmian's blade. This brat's strength is too terrifying. He's only in the realm of the 8 Tribulations Emperor Gu, but he already possesses such strength. I'm afraid that he must have encountered countless miraculous encounters. I must kill this brat. If I can obtain his miraculous encounters, my achievements won't be inferior to the young emperor's. King Manticore thought viciously. He relaxed when he saw that Chu Fengmian wasn't chasing after him. The grudge of losing its tail was irreconcilable. When had King Manticore ever suffered such a loss? In his mind, countless plans to kill Chu Fengmian had already been hatched. Just as King Manticore was about to leave the stone chamber, the blade in Chu Fengmian's hand suddenly moved. A ray of sword light traversed through countless dimensions and suddenly appeared behind King Manticore's back. It slashed down. King Manticore couldn't resist at all. It was instantly killed by the ray of sword light. After the ray of sword light disappeared, the 2 blood-red words, 7 kills, slowly took shape. King Manticore's strength is still too weak. Chu Fengmian shook his head when he saw this scene. After losing its scorpion tail, King Manticore's strength was simply too weak to withstand a single blow. The 5th style of the 9 Mysteries sword technique, 7 kills. The most powerful move was the 2 words condensed from the power of the stars. The ray of sword light was just a prelude. Unfortunately, King Manticore couldn't even withstand that ray of sword light, let alone the next 2 words. This disappointed Chu Fengmian. It seemed that the only way to test the true power of 7 kills was on the young emperor. Young master's talent is truly unparalleled in the world. Elder Fan flew to Chu Fengmian's side and couldn't help but exclaim when he saw Chu Fengmian's 2 strike. Although it was Chu Fengmian's first time using the 4 directions hurricane sword technique, he didn't feel like a newbie at all. Chapter 1672. Elder Fan was completely convinced by Chu Fengmian's talent in swordsmanship. Even the number 1 sword emperor wouldn't be able to find a genius with better talent in swordsmanship than Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian was definitely the best choice to inherit the number 1 sword emperor's swordsmanship. It's just a coincidence. Chu Fengmian smiled at Elder Fan's praise. Chu Fengmian was able to master the swordsmanship so quickly not because of his comprehension, but because of the 9 domains swordsmanship that he had created in ancient swordsmanship books. All the swordsmanship that Chu Fengmian had learned would be integrated into the 9 domains swordsmanship. It could be said that once he used it, it would be like he was using his own swordsmanship. Therefore, even though Chu Fengmian had just learned the 4 directions hurricane sword, he was able to use it as if he had used it thousands of times. After all, there was probably no other swordsman like Chu Fengmian in the world. He learned all the swordsmanship in the world, gathered all the swordsmanship books, and created the strongest swordsmanship. In the eyes of other swordsmen, it was simply a crazy thing to do. After all, for ordinary swordsmen, comprehending 5 or 6 swordsmanship was already the limit. Even the number 1 sword emperor had only created 5 swordsmanship: 3 suns, 4 directions, 6 directions, 8 desolation, and 9 revolutions. Chu Fengmian had learned thousands of swordsmanship, and only he could condense the ancient swordsmanship books and integrate all the swordsmanship in the first place. Elder Fan didn't know this secret, so in his opinion, Chu Fengmian's comprehension of swordsmanship was simply terrifying. However, being able to condense the ancient swordsmanship books already represented Chu Fengmian's comprehension of swordsmanship, so Elder Fan was right. How far are we from the central area? Chu Fengmian looked at Elder Fan and asked. Chu Fengmian had already tested the power of the two newly comprehended swordsmanship. The Four Directions Hurricane Sword was so powerful that even Bone Demon, who was known to have the strongest physical body among the demons, was killed with one strike. As for 7 kills, although he didn't use his full strength, the aura in the ancient swordsmanship book was not inferior to the Four Directions Hurricane Sword, which was enough to prove its power. The power of the two swordsmanship that Chu Fengmian used was stronger than most half-step celestial experts. It was enough to threaten Xiao Di. Now, Chu Fengmian was no longer powerless against Xiao Di. Let's rush over at full speed. An hour should be enough. Elder Fan was very familiar with the Pure Land Buddhist temple. He immediately answered Chu Fengmian's question. Let's go. Chu Fengmian nodded. Chu Fengmian and Old Fan disappeared from the stone chamber. However, the stone room had already been swept clean. Even if these spirit stones were of little use to Chu Fengmian, it would be a waste if Chu Fengmian didn't take them. Chu Fengmian put them all into his spatial ring. Chu Fengmian followed Old Man Fan all the way, shuttling back and forth between the Buddhist temples of the Pure Land. This time, Chu Fengmian didn't choose to provoke other demons. The reason why Chu Fengmian wanted to kill the King Manticore and the Bone Demon was to test out the power of his swordsmanship. Now, Chu Fengmian didn't want to kill the demons and alert the enemy. The deaths of King Manticore and Skeletal Demon were nothing in the Pure Land Buddhist temple. They would not attract the attention of the young emperor. After all, there were hundreds and thousands of powerful demons in the Pure Land Buddhist temple. Moreover, there were dangers everywhere in the Pure Land Buddhist temple. The deaths of 2 demons wouldn't attract any attention, but if Chu Fengmian massacred a large number of demons, it might alert the young emperor. Chu Fengmian's goal was still the primordial blade and the emperor jar fragment. It was better not to attract the young emperor's attention. After all, even with Elder Fan's help, Chu Fengmian was still at a disadvantage when facing the young emperor. Half an hour passed. The passage beside Chu Fengmian had become increasingly spacious. An incomparably huge palace reflected in Chu Fengmian's eyes. The Great Buddha's Hall. The core of the Pure Land Buddhist temple. A large number of demons had gathered outside the Great Buddha's Hall. At a glance, there were hundreds of 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. This was the strength of the demons. Chu Fengmian's eyelids twitched when he saw these demons. So many of them had gathered in the 9 domains. If these demons went berserk, the 9 domains would be completely destroyed in a few days. Among these demons, the strongest aura wasn't outside, but inside the Great Buddha's Hall. Chu Fengmian quietly concealed himself and approached the Great Buddha's Hall. Chu Fengmian was supported by Elder Fan's power. Even a half-step celestial being couldn't see through his concealment. The moment he approached the Great Buddha's Hall, a terrifying demonic aura spread out. This demonic aura was so strong that Chu Fengmian couldn't help but tremble all over. This demonic aura was more powerful than any power Chu Fengmian had ever seen. Chu Fengmian felt that once he was targeted by the Devil Will's master, even if Chu Fengmian went all out and struggled, there would only be a path to death. Is this the power of the Demon Emperor Shuexie? Chu Fengmian didn't need to guess to know that this power belonged to the Demon Emperor Shuexie. Even though Xiao Di was only 1 step away from the celestial realm, his strength was nothing compared to the power contained in the demonic will. It was like the difference between heaven and earth, not worth mentioning at all. Even if the young emperor had a breakthrough, he had just stepped into the celestial being realm. On the other hand, the demon Emperor Shuexia was an immortal emperor. The gap between them was huge. The demon Emperor Shuexia has fallen, but he still has such a strong power. I wonder how terrifying he was when he was alive. Chu Fengmian muttered to himself. Although the demonic aura's power was extremely strong, Chu Fengmian could feel that the power contained in this demonic aura was extremely scattered. It was like an army that had lost its commander. No matter how strong the soldiers were, they would be defeated and not worth mentioning. Chu Fengmian could feel the power in this demonic aura. Chu Fengmian observed for a while, then withdrew his aura and walked into the great Buddha's hall. As soon as he entered the great Buddha's hall, Chu Fengmian saw a figure in front of him, sitting on the highest throne in the great Buddha's hall. It was an old man with a benevolent face. He looked solemn and merciful, like the ancestor of all Buddhas who was delivering all living beings from torment. However, this ancestor of all Buddhas wasn't emitting Buddha's light, but demonic aura. The demonic aura in the great Buddha's hall came from this ancestor of all Buddhas. Chapter 1673. Is this the Pure Land Buddha, Demon Emperor Shuexia? Chu Fengmian's eyes fell on the old man sitting on the throne. He had thought that Demon Emperor Shuexia had fallen into Buddhism, and that he would be like a demon god who had killed countless people, ferocious and mighty. Evil Demon Emperor Shuexia was known as Shuexia. He had killed countless people in his life. However, the old man sitting on the throne looked so benevolent. Chu Fengmian could not believe that this was Demon Emperor Shuexia. However, the terrifying demonic intent exuding from the old man was enough to prove his identity. Buddha body, demon heart. This was Demon Emperor Shuexia, the most terrifying demon emperor of the demon clan. Demon Emperor Shuexia sat on the throne. After hundreds of thousands of years, his body was still immortal. His face seemed to be alive, but he was sleeping on the throne. Immortal body. Even the passage of time could not produce any changes on Demon Emperor Shuexia's body. Immortal true body. Demon Emperor Shuexia has cultivated the immortal true body, just like the bronze heavenly demon. Chu Fengmian had seen the bronze heavenly demon before, so he was not too surprised by this scene. However, the power of the demonic blood emperor was even more terrifying than that of the bronze heavenly demon. The demonic intent that emerged from his body made the demonic blood emperor seem as though he was alive. The slightest movement would wake him up. Demon Emperor Shuexia was once one of the most powerful demon emperors in the demon clan. His strength was almost on par with the 10 heavenly demons. Moreover, compared to the 10 heavenly demons, Demon Emperor Shuexia was not far away from the current era. He was only a few 100,000 years old, and could be considered as a figure of the ancient era. The bronze heavenly demon was a figure who had fallen in the ancient era. Therefore, when Chu Fengmian saw the bronze heavenly demon, he felt that there was not much power left in it. However, the skeleton of Demon Emperor Shuexia was different. The power contained in it was enough to wipe out everyone present once Demon Emperor Shuexia woke up. Even though the skeleton of Demon Emperor Shuexia was an incomparably precious treasure, no one dared to covet it. Chu Fengmian glanced around and saw the young emperor's silhouette in the Hall of Great Strength. However, even the young emperor did not dare to approach the demonic blood emperor who was sitting on the throne. Even though Demon Emperor Shuexia had been dead for hundreds of thousands of years and was only left with a skeleton, he still contained monstrous power. Now, whoever dared to go and collect it first would die. Young emperor didn't dare to act rashly. He simply waited in the Hall of Great Strength, not far from the throne. Although Demon Emperor Shuexia's strength was strong, his strength was weakening bit by bit. Demon Emperor Shuexia's chest was pierced by a broken sword. Blood evil Demon Emperor's body hadn't decayed even after hundreds of thousands of years. It was almost as if he had cultivated an immortal real body. For example, Chu Fengmian's body had only reached half-step undying level, yet he was already so powerful. Not to mention a true undying body. Rumor had it that a true immortal real body was invincible. No power could break it. But now, the broken sword had broken through Demon Emperor Shuexie's immortal real body and pierced his chest, right into his heart. The Taichu sword. The broken sword was broken at the hilt, and the blade was still pierced into Demon Emperor Shuexie's chest. This was the Taichu sword that had suppressed Demon Emperor Shuexie. It was Elder Fan's true body. Looking at the terrifying power emanating from Demon Emperor Shuexie, Chu Fengmian felt that if it weren't for the Taichu sword, Demon Emperor Shuexie would have died. Demon Emperor Shuexie might have suddenly come back to life. Chu Fengmian couldn't help but think of this as he looked at Demon Emperor Shuexie sitting on the throne. Demon Emperor Shuexie had been dead for hundreds of thousands of years. It was a joke for him to come back to life. But this thought suddenly appeared in Chu Fengmian's mind. Demon Emperor Shuexie didn't look like a dead person at all, but a demon emperor who had been suppressed and was in a deep slumber. Demon Emperor Shuexie's power will be suppressed to its weakest state in 2 hours. Elder Fan reminded quietly. Chu Fengmian nodded and looked into the great strength hall again. Aside from the young emperor, there were a few other powerful demons by his side. Almost all of these demons were stronger than the King Manticore. They were strong enough to be on par with Long Mola, an overlord of the same level. They stood behind the young emperor, waiting for his orders. Among these demons, as Chu Fengmian observed this, he suddenly sensed something strange in his mind. He abruptly took a closer look. Among these demons, there seemed to be 2 that caught Chu Fengmian's attention. These 2 aren't demons. Chu Fengmian suddenly felt a sense of familiarity in his mind. Chu Fengmian had never seen these 2 demons before. However, Chu Fengmian felt a sense of familiarity from them. At the very least, Chu Fengmian was certain that he had met them before. Chu Fengmian looked carefully and 2 figures suddenly came to mind. It's the 2 of them? Chu Fengmian observed carefully. These 2 demons were none other than Monk Xuanluan and little Yao Wang Hanyi in disguise. Chu Fengmian had fought with Monk Xuanluan and little Yao Wang Hanyi before, so Chu Fengmian remembered their every move. The moment he saw these 2 groups of devils, Chu Fengmian suddenly remembered. This Monk Xuanluan and little Yao Wang Hanyi were actually the same as Chu Fengmian. They killed 2 devils, disguised themselves as the 2 devils, and sneaked into the Buddhist temple of the Pure Land. This surprised Chu Fengmian a little. The strength of these 2 demons was not any weaker than Long Maluo. To think that the 2 of them would possess such strength. Especially Han Yi, who had lost 90% of his strength after Chu Fengmian devoured 90% of his essence and blood. He was even weaker than the ordinary 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. But now, it seemed that Han Yi had recovered his strength. It seemed that Monk Xuanluan had found a way to help him recover his strength. In this Tibetan temple, the one who knew the most was Monk Xuanluan. He was a Buddhist and was a disciple of the most mysterious and noble Samsara sect. He knew the countless secrets in this Tibetan temple and where countless treasures were hidden. Chapter 1674. Finding a few treasures and helping little Yao Wang Han Yi recover his strength was nothing to Monk Xuanluan. It seemed that the current little Yao Wang Han Yi had not only recovered a lot, but was even stronger than before. As for Monk Xuanluan, his strength was even more mysterious. Even now, Chu Fengmian did not have the confidence to kill him, especially the 6 paths of reincarnation. Chu Fengmian had no way to break it. It was easy to defeat him, but extremely difficult to kill him. It was even more difficult for Chu Fengmian to capture Monk Xuanluan and find out the secret of reincarnation. These 2 people have also sneaked into the Pure Land Buddhist temple. It seems that they are also here for Demon Emperor Shuexia. Chu Fengmian looked over and saw monk Zhuanluan, who was disguised as a demon, looking at Demon Emperor Shuexia, who was sitting on the throne. His eyes flickered as if he was thinking of a plan. Chu Fengmian was extremely vigilant. Monk Zhuanluan's identity was mysterious and his origin was amazing. This person could sneak into the Pure Land Buddhist temple under the nose of the young emperor. He must have a way to get the remains of Demon Emperor Shuexia. Chu Fengmian did not care about little Yao Wang Hanyi, but he had to be extremely cautious about monk Zhuanluan. To a certain extent, monk Zhuanluan might be more difficult to deal with than the young emperor. After all, the young emperor was in the open, while monk Zhuanluan's countless means were hidden in the dark. Chu Fengmian did not want to be schemed by monk Zhuanluan again. But now, the body of Demon Emperor Shuexia still contained an incomparably tyrannical power. No one dared to act rashly at this time. Whether it was the young emperor, monk Zhuanluan, or little Yao Wang Hanyi, they were all waiting. Boom! In this stalemate, suddenly a force of heaven and earth came down. This force of heaven and earth had surpassed the scope of the emperor realm. A half-step celestial being master, and a venerable martial artist. Chu Fengmian could clearly feel that the intruder was not from the demon clan, but a clan warrior. He rushed into the Pure Land Buddhist temple with his tyrannical strength and entered the Great Strength Hall in an instant. The sword Qi demon in the Pure Land Buddhist temple could not stop this figure at all. 5 rays of multicolored light condensed behind this cultivator, proving his identity. 5 Elements Saber Saint. It was the patriarch of the Avalon of 5 Elements who had launched a sneak attack on the Buddhist temple. There were only 2 experts who were half a step into the celestial being realm in this treasure trove. Chu Fengmian's eyes revealed a bit of cold killing intent. This time, his enemies were all gathered together. The 5 Elements Saber Saint, the young emperor, and the monk of reincarnation were all Chu Fengmian's greatest enemies. The 5 Elements Saber Saint had not appeared since he entered the treasure trove. He must be searching for treasures like the young emperor. Now, the opening of the Pure Land Buddhist temple had attracted him over. 5 Elements Saber Saint. This is not a place where you can interfere. Get out. Xiaodi's eyes darkened when he saw the 5 Elements Saber Saint. Previously, he did not enter the Blessed Land Buddhist temple immediately because he was dealing with the 5 Elements Saber Saint outside. He did not want the 5 Elements Saber Saint to know the secret behind the opening of the Blessed Land Buddhist temple. However, it now looked like the 5 Elements Saber Sage had still come here. His plan had failed. In terms of strength, the 5 Elements Saber Saint was no match for the young emperor. However, he was still a half-step into the celestial being realm. Even the strongest Emperor Gu of the 9 tribulations was no match for him. If the 5 Elements Saber Saint intervened, it would not be easy for the young emperor to obtain the remains of the demon Emperor Shuexia. Young emperor, the treasures in this treasure trove are available to everyone. If you can fight for it, so can I. Why do you still want to fight with me? The 5 Elements Saber Saint looked at the young emperor, and then at the remains of the demon Emperor Gu on the throne and sneered. It won't be easy to obtain the remains of the demon Emperor Gu. I advise you to save your energy. Otherwise, if I can't obtain the remains of the demon Emperor Gu, you won't be able to obtain it either. Even under the suppression of the primordial sword, the remains of the demon Emperor Gu were getting weaker and weaker. However, this was only a relative evaluation of its invincible strength. No matter how weak it was, even a half-step celestial being expert would not be able to obtain it easily. If the young emperor wanted to obtain the remains of the demon Emperor Gu, he would have to wait until the strength of the remains of the demon Emperor Gu was at its weakest. However, if the 5 Elements Saber Saint intervened, even the young emperor would find it difficult to fight both of them at the same time. What do you plan to do? The Shao Di snorted coldly and his hostility lessened. Clearly, he was not willing to fall out with the 5 elements saber saint like this. It would not do him any good to fall out with the 5 elements saber saint now. Let's join hands and deal with the demon Emperor Shuexia first. Then, we'll rely on our own abilities. The 5 elements saber saint chuckled. Obviously, he had already guessed the young emperor's answer. All right, the young emperor said in a deep voice. He did not dawdle, but suddenly spoke again. This time, he changed the topic. 5 elements saber saint, do you know that Chu Fengmian is in the Buddhist temple of the Pure Land now? Huh. Chu Fengmian, who was hiding in a corner, was shocked. He did not expect the young emperor to mention him at this time. There were not many people in the world who could attract the young emperor's attention, but Chu Fengmian was definitely one of them. Although Chu Fengmian's strength was only an ant in front of the young emperor, it was this ant who had repeatedly ruined the young emperor's plans. He had even destroyed the young emperor's most promising chance of condensing the immortal true body. Chu Fengmian was now the young emperor's #1 enemy. Chu Fengmian is in the Buddhist temple of the Pure Land? The 5 elements saber saint was shocked when he heard Chu Fengmian's name. Immediately, a burst of anger erupted from his body. The 5 elements saber saint could not hold back his anger when he heard Chu Fengmian's name. Chu Fengmian had killed many genius disciples of the Avalon of 5 elements. His disciple, the 5 elements saber grandmaster, had also died in Chu Fengmian's hands. His hatred for Chu Fengmian was no less than the young emperor's. He could not wait to kill Chu Fengmian right now. Otherwise, he would not have disregarded his status and sneak attacked a junior. A wave of spiritual consciousness swept across. Chu Fengmian sensed that it was the 5 elements saber saint's spiritual consciousness. The restriction in the Buddhist temple of the Pure Land had little effect on the 5 elements saber saint's spiritual consciousness. Soon, the 5 elements saber saint's spiritual consciousness had explored the entire Great Strength Hall, and even the entire Buddhist temple of the Pure Land. However, Chu Fengmian's aura had been concealed by Elder Fan's power. Chapter 1675. The 5 elements saber saint scanned the temple with his spiritual consciousness. Everything in the Pure Land Buddhist temple fell into his mind. Nothing. The 5 elements saber saint scanned the temple with his spiritual consciousness but found nothing. He frowned and looked at Shao Di suspiciously. He had scanned the entire Pure Land Buddhist temple with his spiritual consciousness but found nothing. He could not detect Chu Fengmian's aura. There's no need to search. I can't sense his existence either. However, this kid is indeed in the Pure Land Buddhist temple. I met him in the Pure Land Buddhist temple. There's a helper of this kid in the Pure Land Buddhist temple. He was the one who saved this kid. Shao Di said coldly when he saw the look in the 5 elements saber saint's eyes. The strength of that kid's helper is not inferior to yours or mine. As strong as you and me? The 5 elements saber saint's eyes flashed with disbelief, but he could not help but ask when he saw Shao Di's serious tone. Are you telling the truth? Every single word of this emperor's is true. Otherwise, that brat would have long died in my hands. Shao Di said leisurely. You can't detect this kid's aura. The person behind him must have helped him hide his aura. That's why you and I can't detect it. If a martial artist of the same realm hid his aura, it was almost impossible to detect him with spiritual consciousness unless he was very close to him. Chu Fengmian was only in the realm of the 8 tribulations Emperor Gu. Even if he used a secret technique to hide his aura, he could not hide it from the 5 elements saber saint's spiritual consciousness. However, if a half-step celestial realm expert used a secret technique to hide his aura, it was indeed difficult to detect him with spiritual consciousness alone. The 5 elements saber saint frowned and did not speak. He continued to look at Xiao Di, waiting for him to speak. That kid is still in the Pure Land Buddhist temple. He must be here for that fragment. Xiao Di pointed at Demon Emperor Shuexie on the throne and said slowly. On Demon Emperor Shuexie's chest, an ancient tile was shining with a ray of light. It was the fragment of the Emperor Jar. The fragment of the Emperor Jar was carved into the chest of the evil blood Demon Emperor, and it continued to emit power to resist the suppression of the Taichu sword. However, it was a pity that the power of a single fragment was unable to block the sharpness of the primordial sword. If it had been a complete jar of the Emperor, then the sword of absolute beginning would not have been able to suppress the remains of the blood demon Emperor for so long. It might have even been weakening the power of the blood demon Emperor. Fragment of the human Emperor Jar. The five elements Saber Saint looked in the direction Xiao Di was pointing and saw the fragment of the Emperor Jar. Both the five elements Saber Saint and the young Emperor knew that Chu Fengmian had several fragments of the Renhuang Jar. If Chu Fengmian wanted to recreate the Jar of the Emperor, or even improve its power, he had to get this fragment. Since Chu Fengmian was still in the Pure Land Buddhist temple, he must be hiding in the surroundings and would make a move to snatch the fragment of the Renhuang Jar. When that brat appears, how about we join forces and kill him first? Xiao Di's eyes were filled with murderous intent. Kill that brat, and we'll split his treasures 50-50. All right. The five elements Saber Saint agreed without any hesitation. The five elements Saber Saint was not stupid. With Chu Fengmian's heaven-defying talent, he would be in trouble sooner or later if he was allowed to live. It was definitely a good thing to join forces with Xiao Di to kill Chu Fengmian, not to mention that Chu Fengmian had obtained countless treasures and opportunities. Even the five elements Saber Saint, an invincible half-step celestial realm expert, coveted Chu Fengmian's treasures and opportunities. He had long wanted to kill Chu Fengmian and take his treasures for himself. This Xiao Di seems to have guessed that I was hiding nearby, and now he's roped in the five elements Saber Saint. Chu Fengmian's eyes were extremely cold when he saw that the Xiao Di and the five elements Saber Saint had reached an agreement. If it had been a Xiao Di, Chu Fengmian could have asked Elder Fan to delay him. Then, Chu Fengmian would go alone to take the Sword of Absolute Beginning and the fragment of the Emperor Jar. However, if the five elements Saber Saint joined forces with him, even Elder Fan would find it difficult to fight the two of them alone. Given the five elements Saber Saint and the Xiao Di's hatred for Chu Fengmian, they would definitely attack him as soon as he appeared. However, the only advantage now was that Chu Fengmian was hiding in the dark, while they were out in the open. Unknowingly, half an hour had passed. Demon Emperor Shuexie's power was getting weaker and weaker, and the invincible momentum had disappeared. Although Demon Emperor Shuexie still contained this amazing power, it was still very weak. However, in just half an hour, the power of Demon Emperor Shuexie had deteriorated countless times. Why is Demon Emperor Shuexie's power fading so quickly? Could it be that the opening of the Pure Land Buddhist temple has accelerated the fading of Demon Emperor Shuexie's power? Old Man Fan whispered to Chu Fengmian. His eyes were filled with shock when he saw this scene. Demon Emperor Shuexie's power is weakening in advance. Yes. Chu Fengmian nodded. His eyes had been observing the changes in Demon Emperor Shuexie's power. The Pure Land Buddhist temple was a sealed environment to begin with. In this sealed environment, Demon Emperor Shuexie was able to maintain his strength and resist the suppression of the primordial sword by relying on the boundless demonic will contained within. However, the opening of the Pure Land Buddhist temple had accelerated the fading of Demon Emperor Shuexie's power. It's about time. Let's attack together. Seeing Demon Emperor Shuexie's power getting weaker and weaker, the Xiao Di couldn't help but say to the five elements Saber Saint. All right. Boom. The Xiao Di and the five elements Saber Saint had already accumulated their power. When Demon Emperor Shuexie's power reached its weakest point, two shocking spiritual powers erupted at the same time and bombarded Demon Emperor Shuexie, who was sitting on the throne in the center of the great Buddha's hall. Rumble! The two invincible half-step celestial realm experts joined forces at this moment. The tyrannical power that erupted was almost invincible. No one could resist it. The entire great Buddha's hall was shaking. They attacked at the same time without hesitation. Once the Shao Di and the Five Elements Saber Saint attacked at the same time, the power of two half-step celestial realm experts erupted. Even if they knew that Chu Fengmian was hiding nearby, they had no scruples. Once the two of them joined forces, even if Chu Fengmian had a half-step celestial realm expert to help him, he could only be killed by the two of them. Chapter 1676. Last time, the young emperor had suffered a great loss at Chu Fengmian's hands due to his carelessness. This time, he was extremely cautious. However, Chu Fengmian did not dare to make a move at this time. Once he showed himself, the Five Elements Saber Saint and the young emperor would join forces to attack him. Even Old Fan could not fight against the two of them at the same time. Moreover, there was Monk Xuanluan and little Yao Wang Hanye watching from the side. Chu Fengmian remained motionless, allowing the young emperor and the Five Elements Saber Saint to take the remains of the evil blood demon emperor. Moreover, it was not easy to obtain the remains of the evil blood demon emperor. He didn't make a move? The young emperor's eyes flickered. Seeing that Chu Fengmian was not around, he no longer hesitated and blasted a palm at the remains of the evil blood demon emperor. The palm contained a tyrannical and destructive power. As it blasted out, heaven and earth collapsed as it bombarded the remains of the evil blood demon emperor. The power of the palm blasted out, and the hall of great strength shook one after another. Chu Fengmian noticed that the monk Xuanluan, who had transformed into a devil, and the little Yao Wang Han Ye's complexion could not help but change. It was obvious that this was the first time they had seen the young emperor in action. In particular, little Yao Wang Hanye's eyes revealed a hint of panic. However, the monk Xuanluan's expression was only one of surprise. There was also a look of incomparable confidence on his face. This made Chu Fengmian curious. What kind of trump card did the monk Xuanluan have? How could he still have the confidence to deal with the young emperor at this time? While guarding against the monk Xuanluan, Chu Fengmian focused all his attention on the remains of the evil blood demon emperor. Rumble! The young emperor's palm blasted hard on the remains of the evil blood demon emperor, aiming directly at the wound on the evil blood demon emperor's chest. The primordial sword had pierced through the chest of the evil blood demon emperor, leaving a crack. This was the greatest weakness of the evil blood demon emperor's remains. However, at this moment, the evil blood demon emperor's remains on the throne suddenly moved and stood up. It was as if a demon emperor had suddenly awakened from his slumber. Demonic will condensed, and thousands of demons descended. The surrounding demonic will was so strong that Chu Fengmian felt as if he was trapped in a demonic domain. The evil demon Emperor Shuexie's skeleton struck out with his palm and collided with the young emperor's palm. Alive! Demon Emperor Blood Demon has been resurrected? Many experts of the demon clan in the Great Strength Hall were shocked. They looked at Demon Emperor Shuexie, who seemed to have woken up from a deep sleep. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. Demon Emperor Shuexie was an expert who had fallen hundreds of thousands of years ago. But at this moment, Demon Emperor Blood Demon suddenly stood up from his throne as if he had come back to life. He was still resisting the young emperor's attack. Even Chu Fengmian was stunned. He thought that Demon Emperor Blood Demon had really come back to life. However, Chu Fengmian soon noticed that there was no sign of life in Demon Emperor Shuexie's body. Emperor Gu had not come back to life, but the fighting spirit in his body had not dissipated. For an invincible expert like Demon Emperor Shuexie, even if he had fallen, He would not allow others to desecrate his body. The inextinguishable fighting spirit in his body was enough to sweep away any enemy who wanted to pry into his body. Under the influence of the inextinguishable fighting spirit, Demon Emperor Shuexia seemed to have really come back to life. He displayed countless techniques and attacked the young emperor. 5 Elements Divine Saber. Boom! A dazzling 5 Elements Divine Saber fell from the sky and suddenly condensed into a dazzling 5 Elements Divine Saber. The saber slashed down with a force that could split heaven and earth, slashing the skeleton of Demon Emperor Shuexia. The 5 Elements Saber Saint did not hesitate to attack. He was here for the skeleton of Demon Emperor Shuexia. If the young emperor was injured by the skeleton of Demon Emperor Shuexia, it would be impossible for him to deal with the skeleton of Demon Emperor Shuexia alone. At this time, even if he was unwilling, he could only join forces with the young emperor to deal with the skeleton of Demon Emperor Shuexia. Otherwise, no one would be able to get the benefit. The 5 Elements Divine Saber slashed the shoulder of Demon Emperor Shuexia's skeleton, causing a crack to appear. Although the skeleton of Demon Emperor Shuexia was incomparably strong, its strength was now extremely weak. Under the suppression of the primordial sword, it could only exert the strength of a half-step celestial being. The young emperor and the 5 Elements Saber Saint joined forces and gradually suppressed the counterattack of Demon Emperor Shuexia. The 5 Elements Saber Saint's strength has increased a lot. Chu Fengmian thought to himself when he saw the 5 Elements Divine Saber displayed by the 5 Elements Saber Saint. He had fought with the 5 Elements Saber Saint before, so he knew the strength of the 5 Elements Saber Saint. The current 5 Elements Saber Saint seemed to have become more powerful than before. With one move, he suppressed the skeleton of Demon Emperor Shuexia. The young emperor seized the opportunity and waved his hand. Heaven and earth collapsed as the most powerful killing moves of the demon clan bombarded the skeleton of Demon Emperor Shuexia. A golden figure was about to be blasted out of the skeleton of Demon Emperor Shuexia. This golden figure was the inextinguishable fighting spirit left behind by Demon Emperor Shuexia after his death. Once the inextinguishable fighting spirit was broken, the skeleton of Demon Emperor Shuexia would not be able to fight back. Divine Saber unsheath. Swoosh! A 2-meter-long divine saber suddenly came out of the sheath from the 5 Elements Saber Saint's back. The dazzling blade immediately slashed at the inextinguishable fighting spirit. The words "primordial" were engraved on the divine saber. Primordial Divine Saber? The divine saber of Primordial Saber Saint is actually in the hands of the 5 Elements Saber Saint? Chu Fengmian recognized the origin of the divine saber the moment he saw the words "primordial." The Primordial Saber Saint was once a famous expert in the 9 regions. His strength had reached the peak of the half-step celestial realm. According to the ancient records of the 9 regions, he was one of the most promising experts to step into the celestial realm. The primordial divine saber was his spiritual weapon. No wonder the strength of the 5 Elements Saber Saint had improved so much in such a short time. It seemed that he had obtained countless treasures from the abode of Primordial Saber Saint. Even the saber skills of the Primordial Saber Saint and the Primordial Divine Saber were obtained by him. Although the 5 Elements Saber Saint was also a half-step celestial realm expert, he was still far from the Primordial Saber Saint. After obtaining the Primordial Divine Saber, the strength of the 5 Elements Saber Saint had improved by at least 30% compared to the last time Chu Fengmian fought him. Chapter 1677. As soon as the Earth Origin Divine Blade appeared, the 5 Elements Saber Saint's aura was completely different from before. As a saber cultivator, a good saber was enough to enhance the 5 Elements Saber Saint's strength. The 5 Elements Saber Saint held the Earth Origin Divine Blade and slashed at the inextinguishable fighting spirit. After all, the inextinguishable fighting spirit was just a wisp of martial will of the demon Emperor Blood Demon. It was not a real martial artist. After being suppressed at the first moment, there was not much chance for it to fight back. After all, under the joint efforts of the young Emperor and the 5 Elements Saber Saint, even some half-step celestial realm experts might not be able to fight against the two of them. The moment a few saber lights flashed, the inextinguishable fighting spirit was shattered. The golden light on it gradually dissipated. At the same time, the tyrannical demonic will on the skeleton of the demon Emperor Blood Demon dissipated along with the inextinguishable fighting spirit. Now, the skeleton of the demon Emperor Blood Demon was no longer a threatening enemy, but a defenseless treasure that could be easily obtained. "It's mine!" The 5 Elements Saber Saint roared. His body flickered as he grabbed the skeleton of the demon Emperor Blood Demon. The skeleton of the demon Emperor Blood Demon had no power to resist. At this time, even if Chu Fengmian appeared, the 5 Elements Saber Saint could kill him alone. Of course, he did not care about the alliance of the young Emperor Blood Demon. First, he would get the skeleton of the demon Emperor Blood Demon. Whoosh! The 5 Elements Saber Saint rushed to the front of the skeleton of the demon Emperor Blood Demon. However, just as he was about to leave, a few demons in the great Buddha's hall suddenly stepped in front of him and blocked his path. These demons were not inferior to Long Maluo. Now, they were the helpers of the young Emperor Blood Demon. They were here to help the young Emperor stop the 5 Elements Saber Saint. At this moment, 7 demon experts suddenly joined forces and burst out a tyrannical power. Billowing demonic will bombarded the 5 Elements Saber Saint. "Ants like you dare to stop me?" The 5 Elements Saber Saint sneered and slashed out with the Earth Origin Spirit Saber in his hand. In an instant, the combined power of the 7 demon clan experts was completely shattered by the Earth Origin Spirit Saber. The power of the aftershock spread to the 7 devil clan experts, causing them to spit out a large mouthful of blood essence. Even the 7 overlords, who were invincible among the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu, could not withstand a single blow from the 5 Elements Saber Saint. This was the difference between a half-step celestial being and a 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. Once one stepped into the half-step celestial realm, one was no longer human, but a kind of half-immortal existence. Once one stepped into the celestial realm, they would ascend to immortality and would no longer be different from mortals. Even if he was a half-step celestial being, he was still many times more powerful than the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. Moreover, the 5 Elements Saber Saint had obtained the Earth Essence Divine Saber, and his strength had skyrocketed. Even when the 7 devils joined forces, they were still easily defeated by him alone. However, the 7 devils were already prepared. After only one blow, they all scattered and fled, not intending to be entangled with the 5 Elements Saber Saint. Just when the 5 Elements Saber Saint was about to take the skeleton of the demon Emperor Blood Demon again, the figure of the young Emperor suddenly appeared. The young Emperor's palm immediately blasted toward the 5 Elements Saber Saint. The tyrannical power of the palm forced the 5 Elements Saber Saint to retreat. On the other side, the young Emperor reached out and grabbed the skeleton of the demon Emperor Blood Demon. Multitasking. As the most dazzling genius of the demon clan, the young Emperor's strength was fully displayed at this moment. While forcing the 5 Elements Saber Saint to retreat, he also wanted to take the skeleton of the demon Emperor Blood Demon. Damn it! The 5 Elements Saber Saint was forced to retreat, and his face was filled with anger. He had thought that now that he had obtained countless treasures from the Earth Origin Saber Saint's cave abode and the Earth Origin Divine Saber, he had the capital to contend with the young Emperor. However, he did not expect the young Emperor's strength to be much more tyrannical than he had imagined. The moment he was forced to retreat, He could only watch the young emperor take the skeleton of the demon Emperor Blood Demon. Why is the monk still not making a move? When Chu Fengmian saw this scene from the side, a hint of anxiety appeared in his eyes. He had wanted to wait for the monk to make the first move, and then Chu Fengmian would be the aureole behind. Chu Fengmian could not be sure what the monk's trump card was. The monk's origin was extremely mysterious, and it was very likely that he had an earth-shattering trump card. Chu Fengmian did not want to take the risk. However, the 5 elements Saber Saint's strength was not enough to contend with the young emperor. If this continued, the skeleton of the demon Emperor Blood Demon would definitely fall into the hands of the young emperor. Let's stop the young emperor first. Chu Fengmian saw that the young emperor was about to grab a piece of the skeleton of the demon Emperor Blood Demon and decided not to hold back anymore. If the young emperor obtained the skeleton of the demon Emperor Blood Demon, all of Chu Fengmian's calculations would be useless. Even with the threat of the monk, Chu Fengmian had to make a move. A surge of sword intent shot up into the sky. Chu Fengmian suddenly appeared with 2 swords in his hands. Suddenly, a sword light appeared out of nowhere and slashed toward the young emperor. The power of the stars gathered on the blade. The moment the sword was struck, the sword chi in the sky gathered into a river of stars and shrouded the young emperor. Tan Lang, Zhu Men, Lu Siyuan, Tian Ji. The first 4 moves of the 9 profound swordsmanship suddenly burst out and turned into a river of stars that shrouded the young emperor's body. The kid really made a move. Seeing Chu Fengmian make a move, the monk and little Yao Wang Hanya smiled as if their conspiracy had succeeded. The 2 of them had been waiting for an opportunity and guessed that Chu Fengmian would definitely make a move. However, Chu Fengmian had no choice now. Even if the monk and little Yao Wang Hanya did not make a move, they would only let the skeleton of the demon emperor fall into the young emperor's hands. To the 2 of them, it was only the loss of a fortuitous encounter. It was not a serious injury. However, for Chu Fengmian, if the young emperor obtained the skeleton of the demon Emperor Blood Demon, the primordial blade and the fragment of the emperor jar would also fall into the young emperor's hands. It was almost impossible for Chu Fengmian to obtain these 2 treasures. With the fragment of the emperor jar, the young emperor could search for Chu Fengmian countless times and hunt him down. Therefore, Chu Fengmian had no choice but to make a move. Chu Fengmian, you finally showed up. The young emperor laughed when he saw Chu Fengmian. He gave up on obtaining the skeleton of the demon Emperor Blood Demon and rushed toward Chu Fengmian. Rolling demonic will gathered in his palm and a demonic palm came crashing down on Chu Fengmian. Chapter 1678. Shao Di condensed his demonic will and blasted out a demonic palm. The galaxy around him was shattered by the palm, and it blasted toward Chu Fengmian. The galaxy formed by the power of the first 4 moves of the 9 profound sword art was meaningless before Shao Di. Chu Fengmian's expression changed drastically as the demonic will enveloped him. He hurriedly retreated. But at that moment, a blade light suddenly slashed at Chu Fengmian from behind. Blade destruction. A 5 elements blade light suddenly slashed at Chu Fengmian from behind. The 5 elements blade saint also made his move. His blade flashed as he condensed the power of the 5 elements and blasted Chu Fengmian's back, sealing off his escape route. Obviously, he wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to join forces with Shao Di to kill Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian had escaped from him and Shao Di time and time again, and each time, his strength became more and more terrifying. If they didn't kill Chu Fengmian now, there would be endless trouble in the future. A pincer attack from the front and back. Chu Fengmian, caught in the middle, had almost no way out. Elder Fan, do it! Chu Fengmian's mind moved and immediately called out to Elder Fan. A sword light soared into the sky and landed beside Chu Fengmian, shattering all the demonic palms and blades around him. Half-step celestial realm? The 5 elements blade saint's eyes flickered as he looked at Elder Fan, who appeared beside Chu Fengmian. The aura emanating from Old Man Fan was a clear indication of his cultivation level. He was indeed a half-step celestial realm cultivator. There really was a half-step celestial realm elite beside Chu Fengmian. However, the murderous intent in the five elements Blade Saint's eyes didn't diminish at all. What could a half-step celestial realm elite do? He wasn't the only one who wanted to kill Chu Fengmian this time. Xiao Di, let's attack together and kill this boy. The five elements Blade Saint roared and chased after Chu Fengmian with the divine blade of earth in his hand. He slashed at Chu Fengmian again. At this time, Xiao Di also made his move. He pointed his palm, and the space in front of him began to collapse. The collapse of a finger could destroy heaven and earth, as he used the most terrifying killing move of the demon clan. The two half-step celestial being experts struck at the same time. Old Man Fan condensed a sword in his hand and slashed out. However, he was facing two opponents at the same time, and the young emperor, who was at the peak of the half-step celestial realm, so his sword was shattered with a loud bang. In the blink of an eye, Old Fan was forced back, and the aura on his body became chaotic. Elder Fan's face darkened. In the next moment, he turned into a streak of light and flew out of the great strength hall. The old man escaped. The five elements Saber Saint sneered as he watched Elder Fan's escape light leave. He turned to look at Chu Fengmian. His eyes were filled with murderous intent as he stared at Chu Fengmian. His expression turned sinister as he spoke coldly. "Brat, let's see if you can escape this time." Rumble. The five elements Saber Saint took a step forward and arrived in front of Chu Fengmian in the blink of an eye. He slashed down with his saber. The clothes on Chu Fengmian's body were torn apart. 129,600 blood and flesh crystals involuntarily condensed, ready to resist the blade's descent. However, Chu Fengmian was more concerned about Monk Xuanluan and little Yao Wang Hanyi. At this moment, the two of them had not made their move. I must lure them out. Chu Fengmian's vitality suddenly condensed. Suddenly, a piece of rotten wood appeared in Chu Fengmian's palm. A surge of spiritual power was injected into it. The surging vitality of this piece of rotten wood poured into Chu Fengmian's body. Rumble. Almost at the same time, the blade slashed down and slashed Chu Fengmian's body. Chu Fengmian's figure immediately fell from the sky. Chu Fengmian's breath was extremely weak where he landed. The Demon Emperor did not intend to let Chu Fengmian go. He bombarded the place where Chu Fengmian landed with several punches. Under such bombardment, even an expert of the half-step celestial realm could only die. Chu Fengmian can't hold on anymore. Attack. Almost at the same time, two figures suddenly soared into the sky and rushed in the direction of the Demon Emperor Xuexie's skeleton. These two figures were Monk Xuanluan and little Yao Wang Hanyi. They had been hiding at this moment. At this moment they suddenly made their move. Little Yao Wang Hanyi's speed was extremely fast. In a flash, he rushed over and grabbed the Demon Emperor Xuexie's skeleton. Monk Xuanluan was alone, blocking the young emperor and the five elements Saber Saint, two experts of the half-step celestial realm. Two ants, how dare you act presumptuously in front of me? Die. Glancing at Monk Xuanluan's realm, the demon emperor roared and blasted out his palm without hesitation. The five elements Saber Saint also made his move. A blade slashed out in the air, turning into a blade light that was tens of thousands of feet long, slashing towards little Yao Wang Hanyi. What kind of means does Monk Xuanluan have? On the other side, Chu Fengmian had already concealed his aura and went into hiding. His body had turned into wood and had already fused with a piece of rotten wood. Just now, the bombardment of the five elements Saber Saint and the Demon Emperor had bombarded his body. With the strong vitality of that piece of rotten wood, Chu Fengmian was almost unharmed. Just now, Chu Fengmian had been observing. He could see that Monk Xuanluan had made up his mind. He would only attack when Chu Fengmian was seriously injured. In this case, Chu Fengmian deliberately pretended to be seriously injured. Once the magic of the body turned into wood was used properly, it was almost impossible to tell whether it was real or fake. Even Monk Xuanluan could not see through the mystery. Sure enough, after seeing that Chu Fengmian was seriously injured, Monk Xuanluan did not hide anymore and suddenly attacked. However, Chu Fengmian was curious about what kind of trump card Monk Xuanluan had that he dared to contend with the two half-step Celestial Realm experts. This is... Just as Chu Fengmian was thinking, the changes in front of him made Chu Fengmian's eyes suddenly widen. He saw an incredible scene. The moment Monk Xuanluan faced the Demon Emperor's attack, a jade talisman suddenly appeared in Monk Xuanluan's palm and was crushed by him. In this jade talisman, the surging power of Buddhism suddenly appeared and turned into a Buddha's shadow. The illusory Buddha attacked abruptly and neutralized the palm of the demon monarch and the saber of the five elements Saber Saint. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.